в очах, палає кров у серці, як дизель в двигунах. Важкий кевларний гір, він душу опікає, атаку сухопутні ідуть війська. Піхота йде, вони безстрашні, піхота рве ворожу пащу, ми маєм йти міцніше сталі, віддати честь нашій державі. Війська ідуть, летять снаряди, небесний грім, несуть армади, війська землі, міцніше сталі, за нами мир і честь держави.
Пройду неухильно тяжкий шлях войны мерзотной и кривавой на наших волотных пляжах. Уздымем стяг шляхетной славы, я Калиновский наш Кастусь. Мне приклад так и лёс Литвина, я вызволяю Беларусь. Про вызволение Украины як тур клянусь оборонить. У пекле битвы побратима. Наш гонор вечно будет жить у памяти моей родимы. Обовязково повернусь, коли у битвах не загину. Уродный край у Беларусь, про вызволение Украины, уродный край у Беларусь, про вызволение Украины.
Покинув так давно, цілу Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великой страны.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Ті, хто води всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів. Робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить. Хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар? Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ. Тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer, and my company by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, everybody. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 161 of the news. And it's good to see everybody once again.
And of course, we're going to be reporting on the past 24 hours of the war in Ukraine. And I have to say that we have gotten some really cool news and some very good news from the southern front in the Kherson area. We've seen some stuff today that is suggesting that the Ukrainians have not given up on this area, and they are still pursuing some kind of objective here, although we're not entirely sure how far they're going to go with that. Still, we have to go over tonight's schedule, so without further ado, let's go over it. We're actually going to be starting off not just in the southern front near the Kherson area, but we're going to be including the Kerch news here as well. After we cover the Kerch and the southern front news, well, not really the southern front, but the Kherson front news as a whole, we'll then be moving up to Cherkasy and Kyiv and covering the news there. After we cover all of this segment of news, we're then going to be moving to our location unknowns, which we have a pretty decent amount of tonight. So before we get there, we're going to take a quick pause in between Kyiv and the location unknowns and answer 3 questions from the chat. After we answer those 3 questions, we'll then be moving into the location unknowns and the Harkeep segment and cover that as one complete whole segment. After we cover that bit of news, we'll then be moving on down into the, I guess you could call it the Donbass. It is within the entirety of the Donbass, and so we will call it that, and the Southern Front news as well. We'll cover that entire segment as an individual piece, but of course, before we get there, we'll be answering another 3 questions. After that, we'll continue on to carry all of the news in the Donbass area, and also the speech from President Zelensky here on day 161. Y'all may be noticing that it is that time of the week again where the color maroon has been pulled out. We are literally just a few hours from beginning the very next week of the war. At this point, honestly, I've got to tell y'all, I've lost track of time. I don't even know which week this is anymore, but I've got to tell you that somehow the Ukrainians have managed to hold on for 161 days. They've managed to survive another whole week, and the Russians have still not managed to push any sizable ground or even get to a point where people can say that they are winning the war. It's a complete slap in the face to the Russian military and the Russian Federation as a whole, which wanted to pride itself before the war as a modern force to be reckoned with, the likes of which the United States could not even contend with. Now we can see that the Russians cannot even go up against the Ukrainians, and not to disparage the Ukrainians are an admirable military, and as this war has gone on, we've seen them definitely prove themselves to be a first-rate military, certainly in the category of artillery, but still, it's impressive to see that a country like Ukraine, that nobody considered to be a formidable fighting force, to actually hold back what most of the world, even experts, quote-unquote, around the world in Western countries, to hold back a supposed superpower. It's hilarious to me, and it's crazy to think that we're rounding out a whole other week in this war, and the Ukrainians, of course, are giving it to the Russians every single minute of it. And so without further ado, we're actually going to start off in Mykolaiv and then move our way towards Kerch and then move up to Cherkasy instead of the other way around. And so starting off in Mykolaiv, we've seen a picture today that the Russians have still not stopped their attacks on Ukrainian port infrastructure. Just to give a little bit of background again, just in case if some people have not heard this, the Russians and the Ukrainians made an agreement that was kind of brokered by the Turks that there would be an allowed shipment of grain from Ukraine to the rest of the world to avert the food shortage. This is critically important because the Ukrainians feed 450 million people worldwide. It is one of the breadbaskets of Europe and the entire world. And so the shipment of food that they provide to the Middle East and Africa is crucially important in ensuring that there's no kind of large famines that are that happen due to this food shortage that would lead to millions of people being killed. The Russians and the Turks and the Ukrainians, of course, made this agreement. And just hours later, the Russians immediately began to attack port infrastructure in Odessa, which is only one of 2 port cities that the Ukrainians still have control of that this grain could be shipped out of. Today, we've seen a continuation of these just downright deplorable attacks on Ukrainian ports, where we've seen vegetable oil silos in the port city of Mykolaiv being attacked and on fire. We can actually see firefighting crews on top of the silo trying to assess the damage and perhaps make sure that the silo and the blaze within it can be quelled. It is an incredibly aggravating thing to see, considering that this picture did come out today showing in evidence of another Russian attack, and to think that they are still getting away with this stuff, even after making an agreement like this with the Turks and the Ukrainians, is just downright I'm trying to come up with the words for it. I've seen this stuff for 161 days. And after seeing it for 161 days, there's no words to even describe what the Russians do to the Ukrainians on a day-to-day basis. All I have to say is that the Russians, regardless of who holds them accountable, whether it be the Ukrainian military at some point in the future, or the West if we begin to step in a larger form than we are right now, someone needs to make the Russians pay for everything they've been doing to Ukraine. Because I honestly keep on trying to come up with words to describe what's happened here, but considering that we've seen the Russians do this day in and day out, I can't even come up with words to describe the kinds of atrocities and the carelessness that the Russians have for their own agreements and treaties that they make pertaining to the Ukrainians. With that, we're now going to be moving on to the next bit of news outside of Mykolaiv, and more towards the front lines where we can see the Ukrainians making the Russians pay in a way that is literal. So, to start off these videos today, we have seen something absolutely phenomenal and fantastic. As you all know, the United States has been shipping over HIMARS MLRS systems. The HIMARS is one of the most advanced rocket launching vehicles in the world. The basic missile that can be fired from a HIMARS can reach out 50 miles, which is incredibly far, and they're GPS guided so they can hit a target dead on the nail. The Ukrainians used to have 4 of these, and we used to take a guessing game, where are they in the country? And it seemed like they had one in each part of the front lines that they would move around almost 24 hours a day, and they would try and knock out as much as they possibly could. Now, as far as we know, the Ukrainians have about 20 of them, and we can see that they're getting pretty good use out of them, as we can see here in this video, as they have 4 HIMARS in a battery firing at the same time. It is a beautiful video, and it's a huge testament to the support that the United States has been giving the Ukrainians over the course of this war. So, if Reddit wants to work with me, come on, Reddit. Sometimes Reddit's a little wonky. Oh, Reddit, come on. For some reason, it didn't want to load, but now it's loading. It does this sometimes. Sorry, everyone. We're just trying to make sure to get through this. There we go. And so, without further ado, let me unmute this and show y'all this beautiful HIMARS volley, letting us know that the Ukrainians definitely do have the supplies and the means being provided by the United States and in their own logistics to be able to support this many HIMARS being operated in a single battery. This is a logistical feat in its own right, and not only that, it's a technological feat as well. Here's the video.
Робота по супостату.
We see them firing off their missiles. And is that impressive or what? 4 HIMARS in the single place. Each one of these HIMARS missiles may be targeting an individual Russian ammo depot, an individual Russian command post, or a communications network. A single one of these missiles, when placed correctly, can cause irreparable damage to an entire Russian front, and with 4 HIMARS in a single place, there are 24 missiles being fired, and 24 targets that the Ukrainians can hit, which will irreparably damage the Russian positions for a short while in that part of the front. It is a sight to behold, and I do have to say it's a huge testament to the friendship that the Ukrainians have fostered over this war with the West and our enduring stand to make sure that the Ukrainians can continue to defend themselves against Russian tyranny. It's wonderful, and I hope that we continue to see more videos like this, letting us see that the Ukrainians are defending their land tooth and nail, and the rest of the world is helping them to have the ability to do so. With that, we're now going to be moving to the front lines itself, where we can see a picture of a Ukrainian sniper somewhere in the Kharkovka area, and this man looks mean. So we can see here in the picture, you can't even tell if it's a man or a woman because the ghillie suit is so good. But I gotta say, ghillie suits are something they're starting to become more and more common as war progresses. It seems like the ability to produce these kinds of textiles is becoming a lot more efficient and therefore a lot cheaper. And so we're starting to see a lot of sniper crews all around the world starting to use this as common kit. But it's still impressive to me to see. I remember as a kid, the ghillie suit back then was something that was reserved for only the best of the best, the cream of the crop, because I believe at the time they were a little expensive to manufacture, and they may still be, but this man looks mean, and the sniper rifle he has definitely looks top-notch, and also it's very clean, which is a good testament to this man's, I guess you could say, gunmanship, if you would like to call it. Not really marksmanship, that's a whole entire different category, but the way that he's kept this gun clean, impeccable. Gotta say, very nice thing to do, and it always keeps the gun operational, although a bolt action has very few moving parts, which is the benefit of using one. With that, we're now going to be moving on to the next bit of news, as we haven't really gotten any confirmed news of Ukrainian advances in this area. That's something that we've been running kind of like onto shore with, running aground with, for several weeks at this point. It may be due to the media blackout, but at the same time, it may be because the Ukrainians are not pushing on the ground anywhere in the area. It was alluded that they were going to be having a massive counterattack here, and they had broadcasted their intent to do that for several weeks. But it appears that it was either a ploy, or they haven't conducted the counterattack yet, or they've called it off. We're not really sure which. But we do have some news behind the lines showing that the HIMARS have hit the Antonovsky Railroad Bridge again. This time, as far as we know, it may have knocked out the entire bridge completely. And so here's the video of the Antonovsky Bridge being hit from the distance on a camera at night. So here's the video. We can hear the explosions. And that's a nice little sound to hear. And if we zoom in a little bit more, I believe we actually have a second video of the bridge being finished off, where you can actually see the HIMARS missiles flying into the area of the bridge and slamming dead into it. There we can see the missiles flying in and the massive explosions being caused on the bridge, letting us know that it was most likely wiped out. The little twinkle of the embers out there on the bridge lets us know that more irreparable damage has been caused. And unlike normal road bridges, railroad bridges are built to a stronger tolerance. A single locomotive along with its train weighs a lot more than road traffic really ever can in a single spot on a bridge. And so knocking out this bridge is crucially important, because while the Antonovsky Bridge was already a little limited just by its design as a road bridge alone, a railroad bridge can carry a whole load of weight. You can move tanks across a railroad bridge and there wouldn't be a single question of its structural integrity. We already saw a video a while ago showing that the entire bridge had practically pulled itself apart in the center due to previous HIMARS attacks, and so the question is, what kind of damage has been caused by this attack today? Did the entire bridge get knocked out with a span being dropped into the Dnieper River? We're not entirely sure, but we will keep on looking into this and seeing if that is the case, because if so, then that means that that bridge has certainly been knocked out, even if the Russians try to use the currently damaged bridge, the heavily damaged bridge, in a pinch. Meaning that probably the only river crossing they have is the pontoon bridge right alongside the Antonovsky Road Bridge. So with that, really good to see. Cannot wait to see more news like this coming from the area, because each bridge that is knocked out, and there's only 3 of them, there's one at Novokakhovka, there's the Antonovsky Railroad Bridge right there, and the Antonovsky Road Bridge right here. Each one of these that gets knocked out is less and less of an ability for the Russians to transport logistics efficiently. Because think about this. If you have a single city and there's 100 people living in it, and 50 people live on the north end and 50 people live on the south end, and there are 5 roads for them to move north to south, and the people who live in the south have to go north and vice versa. With 5 roads, you can spread out that traffic pretty evenly, and so there won't be a lot of traffic jams, because there's a lot of options to take. But if you were to cut down that city from 5 roads to 1, and all 100 people had to travel to opposite ends on the same road, you're going to run into a lot of problems like traffic jams. And if you wanted to find anyone, they're all going to be on that exact same road. And so you can kind of see what I'm trying to get at here. All of the Russians that are going to be getting their supplies are going to be getting it, as far as we know, over a single access, which is the Antonovsky pontoon bridge. That means that the Ukrainians only have to target an area right around here where my mouse cursor is circling to be able to destroy Russian logistics that are going to be keeping these Russian soldiers fed and running in terms of ammunition and supplies to keep the vehicles operational. As a matter of fact, at this point, I don't think there's going to be a way for the armored vehicles that are on the western bank of the Dnieper River here in Kherson to cross, because no bridge, rather than the pontoon bridge, are capable of bearing the weight at this point of a tank. So if the pontoon bridge is also knocked out, at least to the point that vehicles cannot cross, we may see a situation like Dunkirk where the Russians are leaving behind all of their armored and heavier vehicles because they just won't be able to get them across. But we'll have to wait and see if that does come to fruition. That's kind of wishful thinking at this point. But one thing that isn't wishful thinking is that the Ukrainians have been destroying logistics to a massive extent across the entirety of the front line, and in the Kherson area, this has been the truth for about a month and a half at this point. We've never really seen a lot of logistical successes for the Russians, and today we have one of the most spectacular videos of Russian logistics going up in flames. Surprisingly enough, we actually looked at this town of Berlivka, and a while ago, we had highlighted an area in the town on coordinates as a Russian ammunition depot. We do not know the exact area that was struck on film today, but it is incredibly close to the area that we have marked on GPS coordinates for everyone to find in the Morse code, and I'm not really sure where this information was gotten to strike the ammo depot, but if it's just a matter of irony, it's incredibly interesting to see that we got the at least general location of this ammo depot correct. And so with that, we can see a massive explosion occurring in what we have been able to collect so far as the rail yard in Berlivka, where a Ukrainian HIMARS slammed into a Russian ammunition train, causing every single rail car within it to explode, creating a mushroom cloud and an explosion that rivals any other that we've seen in this war. So let's get this video up. Alright, and here's the video. I'm going to let y'all watch this, and if we had the 1812 overture over this would be perfect. That giant bright white light in the distance from what we know is a Russian train that is going up in flames. Not only that, is the ammunition is literally flying out of the train. You're not going to catch me in that rail yard anytime soon. The explosion is going insane. There's ammunition flying everywhere. It's exploding midair. And the worst is yet to come. The power of the sun was just unleashed in the middle of Berlivka by this train. Now, let's just go back and watch this as a minute, as the Russians just created a small dwarf star in the middle of this Ukrainian village. Now, I don't know about you, Matthew, but I'd have to say, with that kind of light, I think that anyone who's trying to read a book at this time of day is going to be able to do it pretty easily.
And Enforcer, I have to admit, I actually can't see it because the screen is not being shared.
1 second. Hang on, everyone. I got to make sure that Matthew can see this stuff. So, let me go to screens, and you should be able to see it now.
Aha.
All
Yes,
right. So we're going to go back for the sake of Matthew seeing it, because I want him to see this. I want him to see the Russians harness the power of the sun on Earth itself. And so, let's run that video again. Right there.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty bright.
Yeah, that thing went, I think that, in astronomical terms, if NASA was to look at this, I think they would call this something like going supernova. I'm not entirely sure, but the light from this is incredibly bright. I would assume it's at least more than 100 lumens. And so with that, we're going to let the video continue. Now the shockwave has reached the cameraman, and the shockwave from this train exploding was so large, it seems to have knocked the cameraman over. Now a mushroom cloud is rising into the sky. The explosions are still going on. It is absolute lunacy at that railroad depot, and it's impressive to see that a HIMARS was able to strike that railroad depot at the exact time that an ammunition train was within it. If it had struck it at any other time, it would have just caused damage to the rails, maybe the switches, which is no big deal. They can usually be repaired within a day. But an explosion like that of that magnitude has probably wiped out the entire railroad depot. Good lord, I mean, like, let's actually look at that on Google Maps real quick, and let's see, Brelivka. We want to pull up Brelivka. There we go. So let's go to this on Google Maps, and let's take a look at that rail yard real quick. So as we can see here, it's not a big rail yard. In fact, it looks like it's a double track. It actually turns into a single track right outside the village. We have a small bridge right here. I'm assuming that it's not on the bridge, because that would be a weird place to keep a train stationary. But then again, it could be on the bridge. I'm not entirely sure, but this is not a large rail yard by any means. Maybe the largest part's right here. Looks like it's a 3-track. But golly, if that thing exploded right here, not only did it probably wipe out this entire warehouse, which is most likely some kind of a Russian ammunition depot just due to the size, and just for everyone to know, there's a kind of general guesswork you can make. Russian ammunition depots are not going to be in houses. They're always going to be in larger warehouse-sized buildings because they're conducive to having a large amount of trucks or rail traffic coming through and loading up large amounts of ammunition, or unloading or offloading large amounts of ammunition into the warehouse. So it was most likely somewhere here, right near the train station. And with the size of that explosion, it most likely wiped out the entire ammo depot, if this was one, on the side of the railroad tracks, and probably leveled all 3 railroad tracks for a pretty decent length, probably several hundred yards, which will be knocking out, I believe, the only rail corridor into the Kherson area right now for some while. And so with that, the Ukrainians and their HIMARS strike has probably knocked out Russian logistics in this area, at least by rail, for several days, if not weeks. We'll have to keep looking and seeing if that does become the case, but I am floored that we saw such an explosion like this on camera, which hasn't been rare, but in this particular instance, as a Russian train, as far as we've been able to tell, and as far as the story has come out, this is the first time we've ever seen a Russian train explode like this. So with that, that is the end of the video, and we can see that the Ukrainians are still trying to interdict Russian supplies heading to the Kherson area, which is helping the Ukrainians to further win this war, and hopefully that train caused enough significant damage that Russian supplies by rail to the Kherson area will largely stop entirely. With that, we're now going to be moving out of the entire area of the Kherson front and anything attached to it, and we're now going to be moving to the Kerch Bridge, where we can see that some trains that were heading up this way today may be running into a small problem once they get to the Brelivka area. We saw more Russian armor and equipment being transported across the Kerch Bridge today as a driver filmed a train moving alongside them. And so here's the video. And Hiveland Tough said you can lay track quickly, and that is true. But I'm wondering if you can lay down 3 lines of track quick enough. We'll have to look into that, but that is a good point. Anyways, here's the video. When you see, it appears they're bringing in another artillery unit, at least. A lot of Mista S's on this train. The pride of the Russian SPG force, or the artillery force, as some like to call it. When you see some rail wagons, most likely carrying some of the ammunition for this unit, and some passenger cars where the crew is most likely inside. When you see some supply trucks moving alongside the artillery unit. Decent amount of them, actually. Now we can see the front of the locomotive right there, and that's the end of the video. So we can see that some Russian trains are going to be coming into a little bit of a problem. Once they roll into the Brelivka depot area, there's not going to be a railroad track existing for them to move on further. And so the outskirts of Brelivka, further down the line, may be where that unit has to stop and offload. It may even be further down at an actual depot that may be able to support something like that, like the little village of Myrne, although we're not entirely sure. So with that, it's great to see that the Ukrainians have still been hitting Russian forces in the Kherson area, and we know that their hopes and at least dreams of making sure that the Russians will be softened up in this area have not entirely depleted or gone out of existence. Also, this moving in of more Russian forces shows us that the Russians may not be having an incredibly good time, and they're having to bring in reinforcements to either replenish destroyed BTGs that have been on the front line for months, or they're seeing that the Ukrainians may be preparing for a large counterattack, and they're trying to strengthen their defensives so that way they don't get swiped clean out of the area and across the Dnipro River again. With that, we're now going to be moving out of the entirety of the southern area around Crimea and Kherson and moving up to Cherkasy. And this is something I found incredibly interesting today, considering that it pertains to all of us as the Lee Spring Army and, pretty much as an internet force. I have actually seen that we may be having less Russian bots on this stream. You heard that right. What we have considered technically impossible may start to become a reality today, as the SBU, Ukraine's version of the FBI, raided an apartment today in an unknown location in Ukraine and found within it 1 million bot accounts that are Russian bots, like we see on this stream. And so
my job just got easier.
And so Matthew's job just got easier. I don't have to worry about DDoS attacks too much, although we had that problem fixed a little while ago around day 116. And so this is huge news for us, because we may actually see less problems on our stream, because 1 million bot accounts were literally taken down with a single apartment raid. I gotta give huge credit to the SBU, who's just made our job here on the Enforcer channel a whole lot easier, and also the job of every single Ukraine war reporter out there on YouTube and everywhere else around the world much easier, as there will be 1 million less bots harassing us on the internet. We've gotten a couple of death threats from these bots before. We've gotten all kinds of stuff from them, and it's good to know that they've finally been taken out. And I can't wait to see if we're able to knock out even more bots. This may be the biggest victory, at least on the YouTube side of things, because they've literally wiped out 1 million quote-unquote soldiers for the Russians, at least on the internet. With that, we're now going to be moving out of this bit of news, which I thought was incredibly good to see, and we're now going to be moving up to the Kyiv area. We, of course, don't know exactly where this video was taken. It was taken away from the front lines, and so we didn't include it in the location unknowns, because we would like to give it a little bit of special attention, but we saw Ukrainian soldiers returning home today to their families, probably in some kind of a frontline rotation, and it was wonderful to see how happy and how celebratory everyone was seeing each other again and knowing that their husbands and their wives have survived another several weeks on the front lines defending their country, so that way their kids, what you can see in this video, will continue to live in a free Ukraine. And with that, here's the video. I have to mute it real quick, but we can see all the family members running up, hugging their children. And that's the end of the video. It's a wonderful thing to see, and this is what the Ukrainian soldiers are fighting for, and this is what we as the West continue to support, is that Ukrainian families will continue to be able to live with each other and not have any of them killed by some kind of a merciless Russian attack on their civilian population, and also to make sure that they remain a free and democratic people who can decide their own fate without having the Russians step in and meddle in their own internal affairs as to what they want to do as a nation. And it's a wonderful thing to see little scenes like this, and I always like to show stuff like this every once in a while in the war, because we always see the doom and gloom, and we always talk about the situation on the front lines of the Ukrainians hitting Russian positions, or the Russians hitting Ukrainian positions, and the chances of a counterattack or a Russian offensive. And we never really talk a lot, because, of course, it's hard to get videos like this, and also it's not the moving mechanical factor of this war, but what the Ukrainians are actually fighting for and what that looks like. And this is exactly what they're fighting for, is little moments like these. With that, we're now going to be moving out of Kyiv, and we're now going to be moving out of this entire news segment at the very start of the stream. With that, we're now moving into the next one, which will be the location unknowns and the Harkeep news segment. But before we get there, we of course have to take our normal traditional pause to answer 3 questions from the chat, and after we answer those 3 questions, we'll then be moving on into the next segment of news. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and first up, we have a $40 super chat from Rust and Rot, who says, thanks for your unwavering advocacy for the Ukrainian cause. Never trust Putin or anyone who says you can.
Well, I thank you so much for the support, Rust and Rot. It does help this channel to keep on running. And I thank you so much for enjoying our advocacy for the Ukrainians. Of course, we always run our Sunday fundraisers to make sure that we can raise support for nonprofit organizations helping out Ukrainians in any regard that we're able to find. We'll actually be doing World Kitchen this upcoming Sunday, just for y'all to know. I think that's an incredible one we've never done yet. But yes, I always support the Ukrainians. I have friends in Ukraine. I have one who's in Poltava, and I have, of course, we know Operator Starsky, and there's a lot of people that I've been able to know about and get to know during this war, and they're all incredibly nice people, and I do believe it is our duty as, I guess you could say, the defenders of the free world, not just the United States. I know the United States always likes to hog that title as defenders of the free world, but it's also upon the Europeans themselves to be defenders of the free world. The United States and Europe as a whole are practically the defenders of democracy, liberty, and freedom worldwide, and it's our duty as, I guess you could say, an entire alliance to make sure that freedom can be fostered and defended in other countries that are much like us, including the Ukrainians. Now, it would be amiss to say that the Ukrainians have not had problems with corruption and other things like that before the war, but still, every single year, every single presidential election, each president of Ukraine, each candidate strives to try and improve the, I guess you could say, the lives of Ukrainians and tries to root out corruption. Zelensky has been one of the most forward-speaking people on that, and I have to say that the Ukrainians are always trying to step in the right direction of bringing their country out of the shadow of their former Sovietisms and bring them forward into the Western world. We've seen them do that militarily. Their military no longer works off of a Russian doctrine. They now work off of Western doctrine, much like the United States and British forces use, along with the Germans and the French. And we now see that still, even during this war, Zelensky has been trying to make strides to root out corruption in the judicial system and other political systems within Ukraine. And I think that that's something that should be supported around the world, and that's also something that should be supported from a strategic perspective here in the US, as having Ukraine on our side is far more valuable to us than having Ukraine on Russia's side. That in its own equation is pretty self-explanatory. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support, Rust and Rot. And as long as this war continues, we're going to be here supporting Ukraine and covering this war every single day, except for Mondays, of course. And so with that, thank you once again. And we're on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $25 super chat from White Lightning 777, who says, can the HIMARS hit a moving target like a ship or a train when in use, or counter-evasive maneuvers?
That is an incredibly good question, and unfortunately, I don't have enough knowledge off the top of my head to be able to answer that one, so we're going to have to pull that up. I believe that my basic assumption before we go into this is that the HIMARS missiles use a GPS guidance system, and so I believe the GPS coordinates are inputted into each individual missile before their launch, and then that missile travels directly to the GPS coordinates that were provided. So I don't think there's a lot of room to be able to adjust that mid-flight so it can track a moving target and hit it, but let's pull that up and see. HIMARS M30, I believe. M30/31 missiles. And let's read about these from Deagle. Let's see. Production total cost is $6 billion. Apparently for 50,000 of these. I wonder what that. We'll do the math on that later. The guided MLRS is an international program in between the US, UK, Germany, France, and Italy to produce a guided rocket for the M270, and then, of course, eventually it became the HIMARS. Let's see. We want to go down to the US version. Status active. These are the ones we're looking for, so let's read about these. Will be in excess. I think this information is actually outdated because these missiles are in use. This is what we're actually providing to Ukraine, and they're saying it will be, but we want to know what it actually is. So this website appears to have a lot more maybe up-to-date information. No, it's wait, hang on, let's just read this real quick. Let's see, MLRS launchers, basic MLRS rockets, but we want to find out about the what they call advanced rockets in this title. Let's see here. It has more than 37 miles. We know that that's been up to around 50, I believe, in the newer variants. Let's actually go to the HIMARS here on Wikipedia, and let's just try and see if we can get the missile variant right there. So we got the M30, M31 series. So So let's just copy that and paste that into Google and see if we can get something a little bit more surefire on that. Okay, so we see that one right there, but what about another one? So let's see here. Sorry, everyone, I just want to make sure that we can see what the actual capabilities of a HIMARS is, because while it's impressive and we've seen it only hitting stationary targets, I'm pretty certain, and we'll actually look into a live chat in a second because I just saw someone answer that question a lot better than I can. I don't think it can hit moving targets. So, let's see. I don't think it can. So let's look into the live chat real quick because I'm not really getting a clear answer from here. And let's see what everyone has to say about this. GPS weapons can be updated in real time with certain systems. Let's see. Thank you for saying that. HIMARS can hit a moving target just shot in front of and short. Trainer ship will move to boom. So pretty much it can't really track a moving target, but if you adjust the GPS coordinates correctly to account for the speed of the object you're trying to hit, you could potentially hit it by having the missile drop down right on top of it at a certain time. Let's see, what else? A-10, let's see, rockets, not launchers. Let's see. They are giving white lotas away. That's true. I don't really see a lot of answers to this, but it appears that it seems that the general consensus in the live chat, since we haven't been able to get a quick answer on the internet, is that these things can't really hit a moving target. You can adjust for their speed, but you can't really adjust its flight while it's, of course, heading in the direction to make it fall shorter or farther depending on which way it's traveling. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, at least to the best of our knowledge, and we may be wrong. Might want to check around on that one a little bit because I wasn't knowledgeable whether that was possible or not. And based off of what we're getting in the live chat, it seems like it is not necessarily possible. But with that, I hope that does answer the question. And we are on to the final one of this segment, and then we'll be on to the next segment of news.
All right, and the final one of this segment goes to, one moment, Uncle Tababite, who puts in a $25 donation and says, for coffee, especially during finals, HIMARS for the win.
Hey, well, thank you so much for the support, Uncle Tababite. It is critically important that I drink coffee during this time because if y'all do not know, I am a full-time college student on top of doing this. And so it's a little bit of a struggle right now because finals week is this week and next week. And so I have to go and do a whole bunch of rigorous stuff. Like today, I had to get done writing a pretty big essay on the research I had done on the court systems during Reconstruction in the southern United States. It was a pretty in-depth research project I had to do on top of all of this. And I finally got it written up and sent out today. Hopefully it's up to spec, up to snuff, I guess you could say, because we all know that civilian-grade essays are far better than military-grade essays. If you know, you know. But with that, I thank you so much for the support once again, Uncle Tababite. And also, the HIMARS are for the win. The best artillery systems that the Ukrainians have been provided. Well, that's kind of rebuffing everything else. That has been sent. Of course, this is the best in its class as an MLRS, but there are far better, well, not far better, MLRSs are a little bit different than towed artillery, I'll say that. So the HIMARS is the best in its class for an MLRS, but in terms of artillery, we've seen loads of stuff from around the world, like the Panzerhaubitze from Germany, the Caesar from France, the M777 from the United States, then all could be considered in their own ways the best of their class. And so with that, I hope that does answer the comment, and I thank you so much once again for the support, Uncle Tababite, and HIMARS for the win, and Slava Ukraini. And with that, we have reached the end of this question segment. If you have sent in a super chat, we will answer every single one of them by the end of the night. And I would also like a lot of y'all to know, including our new viewers, that you do not have to pay to have a question answered. If you would like, this is the only way we're able to support ourselves and therefore the channel. If you would like to send in a super chat, that helps us to keep the lights on, pay the bills, and keep this thing going. But you don't have to throw one in to have a question answered. You can simply just throw in your question with @Enforcer or @EnforcerMatt at the very beginning of it. That gives us a little orange box with our names highlighted in it, which lets Matthew know that that's a question that someone wants answered. He puts that down in the spreadsheet, and then we start reading off those and answering answering them at the end of the stream. Just wanted y'all to know, you do not have to pay, but it helps out our channel a massive deal if you send in a super chat, because we don't run ads. We want to make sure that y'all have the most enjoyable experience possible that's not aggravating to have to go through like 5 unskippable ads to get to our videos, and so we've turned them off on everything. So with that, we're now going to be moving into the next segment of news, and without further ado, let's get straight into location unknowns, and we have a massive amount of them today. Starting off, we've seen a bit of a catastrophic failure on a Russian vehicle. The Russians, in their propaganda films, would call this a minor failure, something that could be fixed by a simple mechanic. But here in the real world, in reality, we call this a devastating failure. So, I'm going to let y'all see this little video of this BMP-3 having a little bit of a minor fault. We see the BMP smoking in the field. They do say that smoking kills, and in this instance, it at least destroyed the tank. I believe the crew had already bailed out before this BMP had exploded, and we can clearly see the Z. Well, now we cannot see the Z, but we did see the Z just for a second there. Now we see just a white puff of smoke, and it looks like the BMP has disappeared. Another vanishing act by the Russians, and if they keep up these kinds of technologies of disappearing APCs and tanks, they may be onto something. It also looks like the smoke grenades are working today as well, which is good to see. With that, we're now moving on to the next bit of location unknown news. It's great to see that another BMP-3 went up, and it went up in a puff of smoke. With that, we're on to the next bit, where we can see 2 pictures of Ukrainian M777s in action. I just wanted to show these pictures today to remind everyone of the incredible towed artillery pieces that the United States has provided along with the HIMARS, and these things are changing the are turning the tide of the war in the areas they're being used because they're so effective. They have a longer range than comparable Russian artillery pieces, and also, due to their guided munitions, they can be as precise and as deadly as the HIMARS in an actual frontline firefight. And you can see these 2 pictures here. Really cool to see. This one is really neat because you can actually see the dust being kicked off of the piece as the recoil pretty much shutters the whole entire thing and the dust goes flying off. And I always, for some reason, found that really cool. And you can even see the dust coming off of the soldiers themselves. Don't know why. That's always just been a cool thing to see for me. And also, it's cool to see that there are M777s out there still pumping out the fire. And, of course, keeping the Russians right where they are, which is where we want them to be. With that, we're now moving on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see the Ukrainians conduct a special forces raid on the Russians in an infrared camera. We're going to let this video load. Reddit's being a little bit slow for us tonight. Sorry about that in advance. But this is a really interesting one because we rarely ever see any kind of, I guess you could say, amphibious action happening in this war where either sides are using boats. But we can actually see the Ukrainians using a rib to conduct this attack. We can see them getting out of the rib, and of course doing the typical thing that everyone knows about the special forces. It's a cliche thing they do in the movies, where they just hop out of the rib and then start walking through the water and kind of duck down under it for a second. You can now see them walking down a dirt path, and it looks like they're looking for Russians. We now see them hop back onto the rib and go flying back down the river. That's the end of the video, and unfortunately, I can't really say if they attacked the Russians or not. It's really hard to tell. It didn't look like they got in a firefight with Russians, at least from the drone footage, but that may have been a patrol being conducted by the Special Forces. But of course, I did not see an attack, so we cannot confirm if any Russian forces were lost or attacked on film. With that, we're now going to be moving on to the next bit of news, where we can then see a VOG destroying a command post. As y'all know, the Ukrainians use drones a lot, and that does not exclude the normal civilian drones like a DJI Mavic. These Mavics can be equipped with small little bomblets, usually made out of a hand grenade, and these can be dropped onto Russian positions very effectively. Also, these drones can fly miles behind the lines, so they're far more effective than a sniper in a way, as no actual human lives have to be risked in these attacks, and we can see that they're pretty effective. We can now see a VOG on its way to the ground, and a Russian soldier is standing right there. The bomblet then explodes, and we can see that Russian soldier, somersault? I don't really know. We now see the next clip where another VOG is being dropped and the Russian soldier is now walking down this little path. And it appears that this VOG is heading up towards this garden area, and it looks like that guy just ran into a case of bad luck. We can now see another bit of footage where the drone is looking at a Ural 4320. We can see the Russians, of course, seeing that the bomb has fallen on the other side of the truck, panicking and trying to figure out what to do. Most likely they're going to be in their 10K marathon, which we did not see on film, but we can now see a flatbed Ural moving down the road and then pulling over in a tree line. As we all know, this does not save Russian trucks from being destroyed from a drone attack. In fact, that makes it even easier to hit. We now see the Russian crew hopping out of the trunk and going towards the flatbed side, and now the bomblet's on its way. And now the bomblets hit the truck dead on. We now see an open-top Ural 4320 loaded with infantry, and I don't think this is going to end up well. I don't think that ended well for them, but I can't really tell you for certain. I think some of them may have had a nap. Also, just to explain that real quick, we're not trying to make a joke about that when we say nap. There's some pretty strict YouTube censors out there as to what we can say and cannot say, and in the event of trying to report this war and show as much as possible that is happening, we do have to take liberties with how we say certain things. For example, bodily fluids of the sanguine color usually have to be called something like jelly or, something else, Kool-Aid. We have to come up with something to be able to describe what's going on without saying it outright, because we've gotten age restricted sometimes because of that. So with that, we're now going to be moving on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we see the Russians near a Ukrainian tank in some very close quarters firefighting. We're seeing footage from the Russian forces here, and it appears that the tank is literally right in front of them. It appears that they're actually behind the tank, but as far as we can tell right now, they don't have any anti-tank weapons to hit it with, so they're just laying low and praying to God that it doesn't turn around and find them. That Ukrainian tank is going to town. Alright, so, let me guide you all through something a little bit interesting that I just saw at the end of this video. Do any of y'all recognize what this is? Matthew, can you tell me what that is laying on the ground?
I can't see it that well, to be honest.
Let me back it up for a second and then pause it. Right about, oh man. Right there. What does that look like?
Looks like maybe a missile or something.
An RPG round. And these Russians are sitting right behind a Ukrainian tank, watching it literally floor the guys right in front of them, just laying down machine gun fire and rounds right into the formation in front of them. And so with the ammo here, we got to assume that maybe the cameraman has an RPG-7 on him, and he's sitting there watching his own guys get killed, and instead of loading up the RPG and trying to shoot it at the tank, since its engine bay was looking right at them, the weakest part of the tank, he sits there and he takes a selfie as the guys in front of him are getting obliterated. Now this is Darwin Award-winning stuff. Now he didn't win the Darwin Award, he helped others to win the Darwin Award. But this is maximum Russian stupidity right here, to have RPG rounds, anti-tank RPG rounds right there, and to sit there and just watch the Ukrainian tank literally yards in front of you just floor people. Still, I can't really complain too much, because it's good to see that the tank wasn't knocked out and that it just continued to just literally beat the Russians silly in the tree line. And it's good to see that this guy is obviously fairly stupid to not add two and two together and see, hey, maybe I can fix this problem. With that, we're now going to be moving out of this bit of location unknown news and from this hilarious level of stupidity that the Russians are always exhibiting on the front lines, and we're now going to be moving on to the next bit of news, where we can then see the Omega Special Unit of the Ukrainian forces in action. The video is, of course, taking a while to load. Sometimes Reddit decides that it doesn't want us to get on as easy. But here's the video of the Omega unit in action. Of course, it's got music. We can now see the helicopters flying low over the ground. Of course, they have to do that to avoid manpad fire from the Russians and anti-air defenses. We now see them coming in. I don't believe this is frontline footage due to how high quality the footage actually is. This may be something that was filmed before the war. But this right here is definitely during the war. You now see the Omega unit moving through a destroyed tree line. It appears that it's been hit by a little bit of artillery. Now they're walking past a destroyed car. Looks like a Russian family will not be getting their white Lada this year. Now continuing to move through the tree line. Wow, that's some pretty beautiful scenery right there. Of course, they're in a firefight. We can see a Russian tank right there that ceased to be. We can see another Russian tank that appears to have become a sparkler. We now see them firing across what appeared to be a village. Now they're riding an APC across an open field. You now see them looking through the tree line and holding a position. I see one of the Ukrainians throwing up a peace sign. And now they're showing the artillery, most likely called in by the Omega unit, raining down near what appears to be a Russian BMP that may have a camouflaged net or some kind of trees and shrubs on top of it. Never really seen the Russians put in that kind of effort, and it looks like it didn't even matter. We now see a large artillery hole. You know, that honestly, Matthew, I don't know about you, but that kind of looks like the average pothole in Birmingham.
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah.
Like that size, that's about right.
Yeah, you know, just enough to throw off the tire, the alignment. But we can see them walking by. We now see them holding on to a rope as the Mi-17 flies off. I don't think that was taken during the war, but still, it's great to see that the Omega unit is in action, and it's cool to know that the Special Forces of Ukraine are out there on the front line like every other frontline infantry unit, and they are helping to hold the lines and hopefully push the Russians back in the future. With that, we're now going to be moving on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see some Russian vehicles burning. Another BMP-3, as a matter of fact. When you see the drone getting down a little low, you always got to get a little low to these BMPs because the wind can throw off the accuracy of these bomblets by a load. And now they're going to drop the little bomblet. Well, you can see that the wind threw it off by a pretty good bit, and it looks like it landed behind the turret nearer to the infantry compartment. We now see them looking at the BMP and observing that it has not ceased to exist yet. But there is a little bit of smoke coming out of the turret hatches, which lets us know that there must have been some kind of damage caused inside. Now it appears that a little bit of black smoke is coming out, and as we know, black smoke is the smoke of death for a vehicle. If a vehicle starts emanating black smoke from inside, that means that that tank is no longer and will burn to the ground. We now see them dropping another bomblet on a vehicle that we can hardly even see on film, yet they were somehow able to spot it. And it looks like it may have fallen a little bit off the mark, but I can't really tell you for certain. You now see them looking through the trees, and I think we just saw a little Russian man moving around in there. Can't really tell you. It looks like they thought that too, but it looks like they were flying off at the end of the video. That may not have been a soldier, but still, Great to see them knock out a BMP-3, and we saw the black smoke of death, which lets us know that that BMP-3 will look charred and pretty overcooked here in the future. Just in case if y'all do not know, BMP-3s, along with a lot of armored personnel carriers around the world, are made out of aluminum, which actually has a pretty low melting point compared to other metals, and because of its low melting point, you don't have to make it molten to make it warp or to become brittle and fall apart. You can just get it kind of hot, and it pretty much does the job for itself. There's a lot of video and picture evidence that we've shown on this channel before of BMPs catching on fire, and due to their aluminum structure, they literally just cave in on themselves after burning. So with that, we are now on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see a captured Russian calling his wife. And guess what she says? Hey, listen, I'm a little busy right now. I'm at work. Call me back later. Literally. And so I'm going to let y'all see the speech-to-text translation at the bottom. And this is a sad state of affairs and how little the Russians even care about each other. It's just this particular instance. This may not be the same for everyone. But in this instance, they literally call this man's wife, and she's like, hey, I'm too busy to hear that he's been captured. I'm at work. Call me back later.
Это Оксана?
Это Оксана.
Меня зовут Владимир, я журналист из Украины. Желаете ли поговорить со своим мужем? Мужем, правильно? Да. Он в плену находится.
Поговорить?
Да.
Я готова поговорить, если можно, после 9 вечера, я на работе.
Look at that. You can even see the face of disbelief on the man holding the phone and the husband as they're all like, what? Literally, she says, I will be ready to talk, but after 9 p.m. I'm working now. After she was told he's in captivity. Now, this is peak comedy right here. You can even see on this guy, he can't even mentally process that statement.
Она не поняла вообще чуть-чуть. Муж в плену. Ксюня!
У вас муж
Оксана,
в плену.
я в плену вообще-то. Да, я.
Я знаю.
Ну, у нас просто не будет возможности.
And then we can see him
Wow.
trying. This is unbelievable, Matthew. We can even see him trying to like still process it and be like, well, he won't be able to talk later because we're probably taking him to a prisoner of war camp to sit out the rest of the war. And she's like, whatever. You know, that's fine. You know, I bet you that if he had stayed in the service a little bit longer, he'd be getting that "Hey Jody" letter that everyone always talks about, because she doesn't even sound like she cares about him. She may have just married him for the lot of money. So with that, we're now going to be moving on from this video. And if you have anything to comment to it, Matthew, because I heard you in disbelief as well, feel free, because this is probably one of the craziest prisoner of war videos we've seen.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say, you could see for just a moment on the guy's face holding the phone, he had a little bit of sympathy for just a moment when he saw the look on his face, because he was in such disbelief about what he was hearing. It was sort of cringeworthy, actually.
Yeah, I mean, like, even look at the husband's face. Like, you can see him, like, realize, wow, I think I married the wrong woman.
Он в плену находится.
Поговорить?
Да.
Я готова поговорить, если можно, после 9 вечера, я на работе.
Right there. Right there. It literally came over both of their faces at the exact same time. They were like, what? You can tell right here, the look of regret and kind of like denial you'll see in his face the rest of the time is like, what? You can't even understand. He's like, maybe she doesn't understand. And then she clearly does. Let's watch this whole thing again, because this is just insane.
Она не поняла вообще чуть-чуть.
Look, he's literally trying to reason right now. He went through denial. Now he's going through the reasoning. He's like, maybe she doesn't understand.
Муж в плену. Ксюня!
У вас муж в
Оксана,
плену.
я в плену вообще-то. Да, я.
Я знаю.
A little bit of anger there.
Ну, он
And acceptance. He literally went through the 5 stages of grief. Except I counted one out. I forgot which one. But he went through the 5 stages of grief right there on film after she said, I'm busy, call later. So with that, it looks like he's going to be going straight to voicemail with his own wife after becoming a prisoner of war. And we're now going to be moving on to the next one. And I actually saw someone say it was Electric Dog. He said Russian Seinfeld episode. And I'd have to agree. That's something straight out of a Seinfeld plot. So with that, we're moving on to the last bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see Kevlar being unleashed. Now, y'all think I've lost my mind probably. You're like, well, everyone wears Kevlar these days. What are you, an idiot? Well, apparently the Ukrainians have an APC called the Kevlar, or some kind of an armored fighting vehicle called the Kevlar, and they've unleashed the thing today. As far as we know, these things are prototypes. There's a very small amount of them, but the Ukrainians have apparently pushed at least this one into service onto the front, And we haven't gotten a lot of news beyond that about these kinds of, I guess you could say APCs, their capabilities, or anything like that. But here's the video of this Kevlar being moved out of its garage. That's a really cool looking APC, actually, and it's interesting to note, much like that prototype tank that everyone was talking about with, who was it, the Germans, the new tank that they were making with the kind of like recessed headlights in the lower glacis. They've done the same thing on this Kevlar. Now that's a nice sounding engine. Bet Matthew likes that. He's a car guy.
Ах, Костя, блядь, нашел, сука, этот самый. Если еще все работало, то была бы... Да, то был ты царь тогда был. А я...
We now see it moving out of its garage.
Все вопросы...
See it moving down the road, and a really interesting looking armored fighting vehicle. We can also tell, this is one thing I would like to say with absolute clarity, is that this is certainly something that was taken early war, as we can see that there's still snowfall on the ground. And I actually was able to pull up, I'd never seen this footage before, I've never even heard of the Kevlar that I can remember, so this was the first time I'd ever heard that the Ukrainians had some kind of a home-built APC like this, and I actually pulled up a little article on it here off screen and was reading it while that video was running, and this is a really interesting looking vehicle. It looks like it has the same gun as a BTR-4, but the hull is entirely brand new from what I can tell. It maybe uses the chassis of a BMP. It looks like it may due to the road wheels and their design, but one thing that is really cool about this when we look at it, because this is what blew me away, when they show a picture of the interior, what are these? These are like luxury seats. They even got little head guards on the sides. Now that is a pretty cool looking interior of an APC right there. I don't care what anyone has to say. That seat right there is suitable for any kind of sitting. In fact, they even have seat belts. Look at that. I don't think you can find that in a BMP-1. Let's look at the... Well, let's actually look at that BMP-1 interior. Oh no, you're not finding that in a BMP-1. Look at that. It's like a bench seat, like something you would find in like a 1950s Cadillac, but wow, that's actually a pretty freaking nice interior. You're talking about like luxury right there. That's like a Mercedes kind of seat. But with that, we've reached the end of this little video about the Kevlar. Really cool to see that the Ukrainians have a home-built tank, and hopefully it has served effectively, although we haven't heard any follow-up news on this particular APC since this video was uploaded, which it looks like most likely came out in March or February. With that, we're now moving out of the location unknown news, and we're going to be moving to the Harkeep front, and I also remembered there's an additional little bit of news that we have to cover from Moscow, showing the treatment that Russian veterans get when they come home. But we'll be covering that at the end of the Harkeep segment here. Moving on into Harkeep and its salient north of the city, we have seen a little bit of action today as the Ukrainians have destroyed one of the Russians' mine-clearing tanks. We have seen these before. They fire the large explosive charge attached to a wire, and they've used it to attack civilians inside of their apartment blocks, as we've seen before months ago in the Severodonetsk and Lysychansk area, also in Mariupol. But we can see here the 112th TDU destroying one of these UR-77 mine-clearing vehicles. The camera's zooming in, and we can see they put a little arrow right here to show that the UR-77 is right there.
Real quick, Enforcer, is that a honey badger on that symbol up there?
Yes, it is.
Oh my God, it's a honey badger.
Is it Stoffel? Let's run a
It
poll.
could be.
Is it Stoffel the honey badger, or is it another kind of honey badger? Now you can see them slamming the UR-77 in the tree line. Looks like Stoffel's gotten a little angry. And it looks like it had already caught on fire, and so they literally destroyed the UR-77 within seconds with a single shot. Hopefully, they were able to knock out that UR-77 as it is another mine-clearing vehicle that will never be used to attack civilians or the Ukrainian military ever again, and will never be able to see the light of day. With that, we're now going to be moving out of the Harkeep salient, as that's all the news we've gotten today. It has fallen relatively quiet over the past 24 hours, and we're now going to be moving into Harkeep City. Now, one thing that has been in my mind a little bit is the question of, was this a bit of a Photoshop or was it not? Because this picture shows the Harkeep administrative building and the sky above it at night. I don't know if this many lights have been knocked out or turned off in the Harkeep area over the course of this war, but in this picture, it's actually a pretty interesting, pretty nice sight. A lot of people will never see this in their lives because, me being me, over 20 years of living, I've never actually seen it myself. If the picture will load. Give it just a second, everyone. We are running into technical difficulties. There we go. This is a picture of the Harkeep administrative building, and a lot of y'all may remember that a Russian cruise missile slammed down right where this picture was taken and killed several people that were working inside of that building, wounded dozens, and practically destroyed the building all throughout. It was a beautifully designed building with Corinthian columns and just impressive masonry on the outside of it. And we can see that above it, and I'm still not sure if this was photoshopped or not, because it's just an impressive thing to see, I've never seen this before, is the night sky with almost every single star visible. It's kind of odd, you know, because whenever you think about wars, you don't ever think that when the lights go out during blackouts, or maybe with a complete loss of electricity, that the night sky would look like this. And that's something that's still thrown up in my head as a question is this picture real or not? Does the night sky over Harkeep look like this these days? Because I would really like to know. It's actually really pretty. But with that, that's the end of this little picture, and I just wanted to show it to y'all because I found it to be really interesting if this was a real picture, and kind of beautiful in its own way. With that, we're now going to be moving out of the Harkeep area, and of course wishing all the Ukrainians there, that still are there within the city of Harkeep, the best of luck. The Russians do conduct artillery barrages often on the city of Harkeep, and they did kill a citizen, as far as we know, about 2 days ago in a marketplace. He was an old man, he appeared to be in his 60s, and I was not able to show it on stream, but he was slumped over the side of a park bench, you know, the bodily fluids just flowing down onto the ground, and his life had been ended short for no reason whatsoever, rather than the Russians were conducting another merciless attack on the city. With that, we're now going to be moving further down the line. Well, actually, we're not going to be moving further down the line. We're going to be moving up into Russia, where we can see what the Russian soldiers are really fighting for. They're fighting for an appreciative Russian populace. They're fighting to be able to sit on the minibus when they get back home and have everyone sit there and tell them, thank you for your service. You're helping Russia to become a better country. You're helping the world to become a better place. You're going to help all of us to see the light of day where the Russians will rule the entire world. And they're kicking him off the bus? And he's an amputee?
Так я ноги потерял где? Хоть 3 потеряй, мне как-то без разницы. Там же нацисты, нет, не детей, дитя! Нет! Ну будь ты человеком! Сынок, не могу я быть человеком. Ну как ты не можешь? Ну будь ты человеком! Нет, я очень... За что я отдал свои ноги? Ну, наверное, за свою семью пытался, но ничего не получилось, правильно? А как Поехали! А как же денацификация, дед? Вы видите, что проблемы. Что там за хуйня, дед, поехали? Сохраняем нашу родину!
They're continuing to have a shouting match with each other. We don't know exactly what they're saying, but apparently this guy is being denied a ride on the bus, even after he's lost both of his legs, as far as we can tell, in this very war, as he's wearing a modern ratnik camouflage. Oh my lord! They pulled out a bat on the guy! The guy's literally missing both of his legs, and he's backing his wheelchair away from the bus because someone walked up to him with a bat and was threatening to cave his head in because he just wanted to ride on the bus.
Нет, давай без этого. Без Юлианы тебе сам поедешь. Нет, тебе пизда сегодня. Я узнаю, где ты живешь, где. Пизда тебе. Копай могилу.
Now, that's messed up. I don't know about y'all, but I kind of feel sympathy for that guy. To have your legs blown off where you can never walk again is definitely not a fun thing. Even for a Russian, you know, and what they've done, committing war crimes against the Ukrainians, that's an unfortunate life to have to live with for the rest of your life. And to think that you can't even go back to Russia and get any kind of appreciation from your fellow citizens for the sacrifice you've made, whether it was right or not, whether the war you were fighting was a good one or not, to not even get the respect of saying, hey, man, you kind of lost your legs fighting in the Russian army for Russia. Let's give you a little bit of respect and get you on the bus and let you have a ride. Instead, they're going to deny him a ride. Not only that, but threaten to beat the guy who can't even get up, who can't even stand up because he wants to ride on the bus. Now, I don't know about y'all, but every time we see anything come out of Russia, it's always getting worse and worse, especially with what we see on the front lines, with how Russian soldiers care so little for each other, they'll let each other bleed out right beside each other, and they won't even think about it once. They'll just look over and laugh at the guy like, ha, you got shot, I'm not, screw you. And to think that they go home after dealing with this kind of bodily damage, where they've lost both of their legs, and you can't even get respect from your own citizens. It shows how little the Russians care for each other, and how little, when you really think about it, that they actually care for the Ukrainians. Because they treat their own citizens like this, if they treat each other like this, imagine what they're treating Ukrainians like. They consider Ukrainians second-class and third-class citizens. In fact, they consider them an infestation, nearly. And so imagine how they actually treat Ukrainians living behind the lines in the areas they currently occupy. They're probably treated like garbage. They're probably being executed daily, and we just don't know about it yet because Ukrainian forces haven't been able to roll back through the area. It's absolutely sickening. And that's all the news we have from Russia for now. Of course, nothing good ever comes out of Russian news. It's always just something shocking. And so with that, we're now going to be moving down to the Southern Front to cover the rest of the Donbass news and also the Southern Front news itself. But before we get there, we're going to take another pause real quick to answer 3 questions from the chat, and then we're going to move on to the last news segment of the night. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
And first up, we have a $100 super chat from Michael Kamansky, who says, it's the least we can do. We would all be happy to write letters of recommendation for you both to law school.
Well, thank you so much for the high commendation there, Kamansky, for offering to write us letters to law school. Of course, if anyone wants to write us letters, the more the merrier. I'd be happy to get any from anyone. But I thank you so much for the high praise there, Michael. We're both trying to go to law school. Of course, we're not going to say which one due to privacy reasons because, you know, there are crazy people out there. But we are still trying to go to law school. I've gotten a couple of letters of recommendation all tidied up and ready to go. And hopefully, I'll be able to get into the law school I'm looking for. And they also give out scholarships as well if you perform well enough academically. And so that's kind of been my goal. We've gotten fairly okay LSAT scores, and also we have pretty good GPAs. I mean, like the GPAs are pretty high. But with that, I thank you so much for the support, Michael. It helps out our stream immensely. And it's saying it's the least you can do, that's a lot for us. That helps these streams to keep on going, and I appreciate you so much for giving us the high praise that you've given us, the compliment, and also helping us to keep the stream going, helping us to keep those lights on, and helping us to keep focusing on this as a full-time job. And so with that, thank you so much once again, Michael, for the huge amount of support. And if everyone would like to thank Michael for that, he is helping this stream to keep on going. And so with that, we are on to the next question, and thank you once again for the support.
And yes, thank you very much, Michael, for that very generous support and the kind words as well. And we appreciate you very much. And up next, we have a $22 super chat from Dupper Bob, who sends a smiley face.
Well, thank you so much for the support, Dupper Bob. And that's kind of nice. I wish I could have seen it. I know it's a super sticker, and we always like to comment on the super stickers at least. But thank you so much once again for the support. It helps the channel to keep on running. And without viewers like y'all, it wouldn't be possible to keep this running. And so thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address the super sticker. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And next up, we have 2 super chats without donations, or excuse me, without donations, without comments, I meant to say. We have one from Osio Duhitsu, who puts in a $20 donation, as well as Junebug with the 72 on the end, who also puts in a $20 donation. So thank you very much to both of you for your support of the channel. I know Junebug72 has been around for a very long time. And Osio, I think you've been around for quite a long time as well, if I remember properly. But thank you very much to both of you. And moving on, we have a $20 super chat from Kaltenberg, who says, Slava Ukraine.
In Kaltenberg, Slava Ukraini, and thank you so much for the support. You've been here forever helping these streams to keep running, along with Junebug72, BC Skyman, who I just saw through in a super chat like usual, and I got to thank all of y'all who are our regular supporters of the stream. Without y'all, we couldn't keep this thing running. I seriously mean that when I say it, and so I got to thank all of you so much for y'all's support, because it really does help the lights to keep going. There's no way I can even really describe how to put that into words, because Matthew, we literally just survive off of super chats. There's no ads we run, and I always like to talk about that and brag about it, because I find it incredible that the Lee Spring Army helps us to make sure that that never becomes a reality, where all of our videos are ad-free, and you can just hop on them immediately without an ad running and see them for yourselves. I think that's a huge testament to y'all, that y'all have helped us to keep doing that for so long, 161 days in, and that we'll be able to keep on doing it thanks to y'all's support. And so with that, I hope that does address the comment, and I thank you so much once again, Kaltenberg, for the support, and Slava Ukraini. And so with that, we have reached the end of this question segment. We're now going to be moving on to our last bits of news for the night from the Donbass area, the Southern Front, and also the speech from President Zelensky. After the speech from President Zelensky, that will be rounding out our news segment for the night, and we'll then be moving immediately into the question segment for the rest of the night. We'll be answering everyone's super chats and as many live chats as possible. And so with that, we're now moving down into the area of the Cave Monastery, where we've seen today that the Ukrainians have raised their flag, the banner of the Ukrainian people, over the highest point over the Cave Monastery. And so, without further ado, here's the video. We're going to have to mute it real quick, but we can see the Ukrainian flag right there, and that they're preparing to fly it high over the land to let the Russians know that they'll never be able to take this place from them. We can see the massive statue there, and it looks like the hand of the statue is actually holding the Ukrainian flag over the town. And surprisingly enough, last we saw, Russian forces were actually right down there. Believe it or not, we actually saw footage weeks ago, nearly a month ago, I believe, of Russian tanks trying to push down to this bridge. And we can see that the Ukrainians blew out both sides of the bridge. We can see that only the middle spans still stand, and the Seversky Donetsk River still flows with water deep enough and wide enough that it would be too difficult for the Russians to try and cross without taking heavy losses. So, I gotta say once again, it's great to see that they were able to stop the Russian advance in this area, and now the statue, I'm not really sure what the statue is supposed to represent, but it is holding a Ukrainian flag high above the Cave Monastery and letting the Russians know this land will never be theirs. And so with that, that is the end of that video, and a very nice one to see, and hopefully that Ukrainian flag will continue to fly over the Cave Monastery until the very end of this war. With that, we're now going to be moving beyond the Slovyansk area and also towards the Lysychansk area, where we've gotten a little bit of news today, showing a Russian tank cooking off. Some Russian tanks like to have cooking competitions, and of course the Ukrainians always like to oblige them with a little bit of heat. We can see here that the Ukrainians have added the propane to the fire, and the Russians, of course, provided the coals, as we can see the Stugna slam into the tank, and it immediately begins to detonate the ammunition, causing a large fire and leading the tank to be destroyed. That's the end of the video, and tell me in the chat what y'all think the Ukrainians could cook on that campfire. S'mores, hot dogs, hamburgers? Tell me what you think. Every single Russian tank that goes up, once again, is another Russian tank that will not be able to push an offensive, and another tank that will not be able to defend the land they've already taken from the Ukrainians. It's a wonderful thing to see, and hopefully, with each tank destroyed, the war will be coming to an end even sooner. With that, we're now going to be moving further south along this front line to the area of Sperny, where we've seen Ukrainian trenches being shelled by Russian artillery. And as we move farther down the front and more towards the Donetsk area, we have seen that the Russians apparently are beginning a brand new offensive based off of the video evidence we've gotten today, westwards from the Donetsk area. So here's the video of the artillery coming down on this Ukrainian trench. That shell landed incredibly close. It seems like the camera's been covered in dust and smoke. The entire trench is filled with smoke, letting us know that that shell landed incredibly close. The cameraman appears to now be hiding inside of a dugout and looking outside to see what kind of damage has been caused. Another shell landed right nearby, and we hear dirt falling back into the trench again. We can hear more rounds coming in. And of course, the brave Ukrainian soldiers rough it out in the trenches. And we've always seen them spurting off with a smile or a little bit of a laugh. We can't see it in this video because the smoke is incredibly thick, and we've also never seen the camera face the soldier who's holding it. But I'm sure he is as stoic and as calm as the rest of them. And that's the end of the video. And once again, it shows that Ukrainian soldiers are bent and determined to hold the line at any cost. Well, that we're now going to be moving down to the village of Bila Orivka, where, oh boy, we've seen something straight out of Enemy at the Gates. If y'all do not remember Enemy at the Gates, well, tell me something, Matthew. Can we get in trouble copyright-wise if we showed a clip from Enemy at the Gates without any audio included?
I believe we could.
I think we might. Unfortunately, I won't be able to show y'all this, but y'all may remember the avid World War II historians these days who say, oh, no one would ever conduct a massive push straight onto an enemy position in some kind of a mass suicide charge. That doesn't make any sense, and that's trying to make the Russians look like their commanders in World War II were stupid, and yada yada yada, blah blah blah. And we got a video today showing that they were doing that exact thing in this war. At least they were trying to make it look like that. And so with that, here's the video of a human wave rolling onto supposed Ukrainian positions that the Russians filmed with a drone. Here's the video. Oh my god.
Выбить боевиков из этого гигантского укрепрайона под городом Артемовск, который власти Новой Украины переименовали в Бахмут. Сразу за ним дорога на Славянск и Краматорск. На стратегически важном направлении украинские националисты вырыли многокилометровые окопы, укрепили бревнами, бетоном, выставили дзоты на холмах. Но наша авиация и в такой фортификации пробьет
Sure, an SU-25 flying over.
от авиабомбы.
Look at that staunch Ukrainian resistance right there. Just soldiers lining the trench from top to bottom, bristling with machine guns, and the Russians heroically charging up to this completely empty trench with no Ukrainians in it whatsoever, acting like they're winning the war.
После пролета грачей вдоль самой земли выход крылатой пехоты. Мы за вами или отсюда?
Ну, вы за нами.
Это бахмутское направление. Штурмовые группы российских десантников, прикрываясь высокой травой, идут в атаку. Сейчас будут занимать огневые точки. Реактивный пехотный огнемет «Шмель» обладает чудовищной силой, выжигая все, что находится
Look at the
внутри
brave Russian soldiers as they charge across the land for miles around with no one around. They are brave. They are very brave for standing out in the open and having the gall to do such a thing. If the Ukrainians were around, they would put a stop to this. But of course, the brave Russians do care about that, and they want to make sure that absolutely no one's around when they pull off silly shenanigans like this.
Сперва нужно к нему подобраться.
Выстрелу готов! Рано, 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 старый дальше!
Oh, look,
Противник уже
they've
в
spotted a
300
Ukrainian.
Разобьет огонь!
Oh my gosh, oh my lord, they hit a vehicle that was right in front of them. Let's see if we can see it. That's not a vehicle. That's not a vehicle. That was like a berm or something.
Прикрытие, луганские танки.
Always interesting how they never show us these vehicles, quote unquote, that they're always hitting. Isn't it weird? Isn't it really weird that you can't really see it at all in the film? And then it explodes. No black smoke of death, just a whole bunch of dirt. And they act like, oh, we've hit a Ukrainian vehicle. This is a load of garbage. And we can hear the reporter. This is not a training video. We literally heard them saying Bakhmut, which means that they're in the Bakhmut area, according to this report. And there's no Ukrainians around. They definitely didn't hit a vehicle. And this whole entire thing is staged to all get out.
Прикрытие. Луганские танки разбирают укрепления боевиков, оперативно меняя огневые точки.
Wow, what in the world is he shooting at? The moon? Like, that's the same round. If he was firing with an elevation that high, that round would have gone 7 miles away. He's using that thing like a freaking Mista B. That's not even being used as a main battle tank. That's like indirect fire.
Вот только что отработал наш танк войск ЛНР и быстро покидает позицию.
Oh my god. Andy, look, this guy's still in driving school. He's literally making a new road beside the current one. Jesus.
That's the road making crew.
Yeah, that's the Russian construction crew right there. They're doing a road widening operation.
Но сколько бы Запад не накачивал украинских националистов противотанковыми комплексами, чтобы их применить, нужен боевой дух. А вот украинский солдат просто прижался к земле. Чего ждать?
Oh, look, that shows some serious damage to the Ukrainian forces. A little bit of disturbed dirt. They're definitely beating the Ukrainians back right now. It's over.
Луганский танк ведь вновь ударит с другой стороны. В итоге боевики просто бегут со своих позиций без оглядки. Мощный натиск на укрепрайон помогла совершить 4-я бригада войск ЛНР, которая выбивает противника на своем основном направлении.
But you now see the crew of pirates here. It looks like they're all part of Captain Hook's crew using a DJI Mavic. Jeez. You couldn't come up with a more mismatched crew. This guy doesn't even have fitting pants. Look how big they are. Golly, that's like Mr. Lunchtime's pants. It looks like they're ripped in the front. They're ripped. He's like wearing underwear up here, and the rest of it's ripped off.
Войск ЛНР, которая выбивает противника на своем основном направлении под Северском. Здесь украинские националисты тоже выстраивают все новые линии обороны. Вот расширяют окопы посреди поля. В полный рост смотрят в бинокли. Кажется, в себе уверены. Но это до тех пор, пока не начинают работать луганские артиллеристы.
Орудие!
Теперь перемещаются ползком, нырками, но это были...
You know something weird? You know something really weird about this footage? Is that it was really short-lived. You notice how that artillery shell literally landed off-screen? That's not even close. That's like the edge of the explosion right there. And that explosion is fairly wide. And so that shell landed even further off-screen than what you're seeing right there. And that soldier ducked. He didn't get hit by shrapnel. He ducked once the shell was coming in. So none of these guys got hit, and of course the Russians are trying to make it look like, oh, look at us, we're wiping out Ukrainian positions. Not a single one of them was probably even wounded. Maybe the guy who ducked for cover, maybe he did take a small amount of shrapnel, but a fatal hit, no. And the Russians are still, of course, trying to make it look like that. So once again, great footage from this Russian bot that can't even spell Bakhmut correct. It says Bakhmut. Not even Bakhmut. It says Bakhmut. So it's great to see that the Russians are still trying to rename towns all across the front. Now Bakhmut's being called Bakhmut. And so with that, we're now going to move further down the line, where we can see a big explosion on the Russian side, somewhere in the Popasna area, as a vehicle was hit, and it appears to no longer exist. So with that, here's the video. We could see the vehicle. We can now not see the vehicle. So with that, that's the end of the video. And a nice little explosion of another Russian vehicle, letting us know that the Ukrainians are still destroying Russian equipment and units in this area. Also, I saw the typical comment from a viewer who says, looks like training. I would agree if it wasn't for the reporter literally saying Bakhmut in his news coverage, which lets us know that they're saying that this is in the Bakhmut front. So that's kind of why it's not training footage. I knew that someone was going to say that. I actually prefaced that video by saying some people may say this is training footage. The Russians are reporting it as actual frontline news. With that, we're now going to be moving out of the Lysychansk finger. We haven't really heard of a lot of I guess you could say, advances or counterattacks that are incredibly strong in this area. It appears that the Russians are conducting some light offensives towards the Bakhmut region, but every single day the Ukrainians stop these attacks and repulse them. So it appears that nothing severe is happening in this area, although we are getting a little bit of elevated news. Moving on down into the Donetsk area, however, it does appear that the story is entirely different. Here in this clip, we can see a Ukrainian tank firing at Russian forces in the distance. It always bewilders me how flat Ukraine is. See the tank moving forward and firing. Moving forward a little bit more down this road, and then firing again. That's the end of the video, and as we move on further into the town of Avdiivka itself, we can see that the Russians are continuing their attacks on Avdiivka, at least on film. So with that, here's the video of these Russians in the Avdiivka area.
Позиции попадут в окружение.
Ну да, если мы ничего... эти немцы, да.
Нижние, да, попадет в окружение.
Вот, если мы не сделаем, тогда вот этим парням тоже их отрежем.
Now, see the Russians using their outdated... oh my gosh, this is an outdated Cold War helmet. It doesn't even have a cover on it to make it look modern. They've just given up at this point with that. Here's some rounds flying over their heads. I see them moving through some brush. Going to turn this down a little bit so that way YouTube hopefully doesn't give us another copyright. Well, now we're really going to have to turn it down because that music's kind of getting loud. So now we see the Russian giving a little bit of a vlog update. Let's see if they cut out the music. I'm sure it's just blaring. Oh wow, we unmuted it just in time for the music to start again. Now I'm going to see Pavel here in his 1960s gear, giving a little bit of a monologue. I bet he feels just like his granddad in the Great Patriotic War because he's dressed just like him. Now moving out of the tree line and out into the wide open, which is always a smart idea. Remember, kids, when you're in a war, always stand in the open. I hear the firefight picking up. I'm just going to have my mouse cursor on the volume button, so when the music gets loud, we'll mute it, and then we'll try and unmute it later on. Another vlog update.
Как я предполагал. Я не высказывал этого подозрения вслух. Начали закидывать нас гранатами. Мне прилетело в ногу, но там совсем непонятно.
Oh no. What happened here? Oh no, it looks like even in the Russian Today propaganda films, it looks like the Russians get hit. Who would have thought?
Там совсем непонятно, только кровь сочится.
Now he's sitting here talking. He's probably saying something like, you know, now that I've got a little bit of Kool-Aid on me, I'm probably going to end up getting my parents a white latte, and my wife won't even care. Also, how is he wearing this helmet? Like, the whole point of these modern helmets is to cover your freaking forehead, and this guy's got it so far back, his forehead's wide open. Like, his whole entire front of the face is just wide open. He's wearing it like a... whatever. He's wearing it like a bonnet. We're just going to move on. This is typical Russianry.
Помочь его тащить. Осколок, думаешь? Я его мам.
See him pouring some borax on the wound. I mean, you hear the Battlefield 4 music still playing slightly.
Я сам он прикрываю вас. Отходи. Отхожу, отхожу.
Everyone's like, are you okay? Are you okay? And he's like, yeah, I just poured sawdust in my wound. It's perfect.
Нормально? Выходим, не сидим.
I see him passing through this unit. Looks like some of them actually do have modern helmets. Not modern camo covers on them, though. What in the world's that? What is that? That's not even a helmet. That's like a bowling ball they cut in half. That's the bowl cut helmet. Uh-oh. Looks like the Russians aren't even winning in their own propaganda films. Oh wow, they're just gonna drag the guy across the ground. That's a great evacuation team. Look at this. Smacking his head into tree limbs and stuff. We now see this guy walking into what appears to be a churned up area. Some ammunition lying around. Well, casings lying around, more like it. That's the end of the video, and a pretty entertaining one at that, just to see how bad off they are. Not really a lot to explain there. Moving on to the next bit of news in the Pisky area, we can see artillery being used on Ukrainian forces here, showing that the Russians are starting to ramp up their activities, at least in the form of bombardments. We see Ukrainian forces moving through this area and now ducking for cover, moving through the trench lines as fast as they can. And now the artillery is coming down, but the Ukrainians have long left this area where they're bombarding. In typical Russian fashion. Now see another Ukrainian soldier hopping into the trench, more of them moving forward, and the artillery is still falling behind them. We now see them backtracking into the same area. Wait a minute, they're showing the same footage in a circle. Don't tell me. Are they really doing that? These people are padding footage and repeating things over again and hoping you don't catch it to make it look like loads of you. Look, the same guys going into the trench again, running up it. And this isn't a replay of this tweet. This is literally the same one. And the Russians are literally padding footage to have it play twice over in the same clip to make you think that there are more Ukrainians that are in this artillery barrage than it seems. Kind of sad. With that, we're now going to be moving out of this area. As we can see, the Russians have picked up artillery bombardments. And we're now going to move down to the area of Marinka, where we've also seen more bombardments by the Russians here. Of course, we have to mute it, but we can see smoke billowing up from all over the place as the pot marks and craters billow off a little bit of smoke for a little while after an MLRS barrage. But we can see the Russians continuing to try and uproot the Ukrainians from their positions. But as we know, this is one of the most heavily fortified areas of the line, and doing that is next to impossible for both sides. You can see the artillery is still coming down, and we can actually see two distinct ponds there, which could kind of give us an idea of where exactly this occurred in Marinka. Two distinct ponds. We're looking for two distinct ponds. These? No. Let's see. These? Maybe. Maybe. That's a little bit of a stretch, but it may be those exact ponds right here. Well, that's the end of the video. And we can see that the Russians are bombarding and fighting in the 3 major areas that extend outwards of Donetsk on the major roadways, through Pisky, Avdiivka, which is connected to the H20, and also Marinka, which is on the N15. And based off of all of these all of the video evidence today, it appears that the Russians may be attempting a quick push out of the Donetsk front to try and make a more precarious situation for the Ukrainians and the entirety of the Donbass region. It most likely will not be successful due to how strong the defensive positions are in this area, but still, we'll just have to wait and see. With that, we're now moving out of the Donetsk region and on to our last bit of news before the speech from President Zelensky, where we can see that artillery hit the Russians today in the southern front. And so, without further ado, here's the video. You see the Russian vehicles here, and the artillery begins to rain down. With artillery raining down, chaos always ensues in the Russian units. And we see that that truck almost got hit by some artillery. You see here a vehicle moving further up the way, kind of near a tree line. You see a marker being put on top of it, but we don't see another shell coming in. Actually, we saw a shell land dead onto it, so that's pretty nice. That's the end of the video, and out of it, we could see that one Russian vehicle was hit dead on. It appears that the rest of them may have gotten out unscathed, but that is another Russian vehicle that will never be used again. With that in mind, we have not seen a lot of activity on the southern front, which does suggest that it is still a stalemate like it has been for months. With that, we're now going to be moving out of the frontline news altogether and all the way back up to Kyiv, where we're going to listen to the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky as we round out this week of the war. And so, without further ado, here's the speech from the man, the myth, the legend, the man who said I need ammunition, not a ride, President Volodymyr Zelensky.
Українці, цими днями в нашому інформаційному просторі і в соцмережах дуже багато повідомлень про конфліктні ситуації і загрози, які в інших географіях. Спочатку Балкани, потім Тайвань, тепер може бути Кавказ. Всі ці ситуації здаються різними, хоча їх об'єднує один фактор, а саме глобальна архітектура безпеки не спрацювала. Якби спрацювала, не було би всієї цієї конфліктності. І це те, насправді, на що Україна звертає увагу не тільки 161 день від початку повномасштабної війни, а вже роками, з того часу, як Росія проігнорувала міжнародне право повністю. Інтереси людяності як такої повністю. 2014 рік став поворотним моментом, тоді в цілком очевидних ситуаціях з Кримом, з Донбасом, зі збитим малазійським Боїнгом Росія уникнула негайної і відчутної відповідальності, зберегла бізнесові та політичні зв'язки зі світом. І тепер багато хто у глобальних відносинах вірить, що і йому це вдасться. Ось чому українці зараз роблять дуже важливу справу для усіх у світі. Наш народ об'єднав вільний світ не просто навколо своєї боротьби за свободу, а навколо розуміння, наскільки крихкою є наша свобода, свобода кожного народу в Європі та в інших частинах світу. Цю крихкість можна захистити тільки спільними діями. І щоб це працювало в довгостроковій перспективі, має бути ефективна архітектура глобальної безпеки, яка гарантує, що жодна держава ніколи більше не зможе вдаватись до терору проти іншої держави. На системному рівні, на рівні глобальних інституцій, саме для цього ми зараз працюємо. І українська держава, і всі наші партнери. Сьогодні поспілкувався зі студентською спільнотою Австралії, понад 20 університетів, а також цікавість провідних медіа Австралії, політиків. Закликав усіх наших австралійських друзів допомагати нам в інформаційній війні і максимально поширювати правду про український захист і російський терор. Треба вирішити надзвичайно важливе національне завдання. Українську точку зору мають бачити і чути в тих частинах світу, де російська пропаганда досі дуже гучна. Це стосується і Тихоокеанського регіону, і країн Південної та Східної Азії, Арабського світу, Африки, Латинської Америки. І тому потрібна інформаційна підтримка від усіх наших людей, усіх друзів за кордоном, чий голос може бути почутий. Зустрівся сьогодні з міністром закордонних справ Естонії, який відвідав Україну, подякував йому за те, що він розпочав візит З теми відновлення України в Житомирській області в рамках нашого плану швидкого відновлення Fast Recovery плану почнеться будівництво першого дитячого садочка з 15 об'єктів, які запропоновані естонському уряду для допомоги у відбудові області. Це надзвичайно важливо саме зараз, коли переселенці повертаються додому. Естонія – одна з тих держав, які почали допомагати нам ще до 24 лютого, і чия підтримка стала надзвичайно вагомою. Україна завжди це пам'ятатиме. Швейцарія сьогодні приєдналась до 7-го пакету санкцій Європейського Союзу, і я вдячний за це. Коли така країна не залишається нейтральною у захисті цінностей і людської моралі, це дуже вагомий сигнал для усього світу. Зараз відчувається, що в Росії почали усвідомлювати неминучість визнання державою терористів. Після усього, що наробила російська армія та нібито приватні російські військові компанії, жодна інша терористична організація світу не може претендувати на першість у терорі. Росія точно номер один серед терористів. І це точно заслуговує на юридичні наслідки, зокрема у рішеннях Сполучених Штатів та інших світових суб'єктів. І саме через це з Москви пішла нова пропагандистська активність. Вони раптово вирішили визначити азовців терористами, хоча коли це робить держава-терорист, то це, очевидно, абсурдно. Вони активують різних емісарів з тезами про те, що держава-терорист ніби хоче переговорів. Якщо б Росія дійсно, реально хотіла закінчення війни, вона б не стягувала зараз резерви на український південь і не плодила би на українській території масові могили убитих, невинних людей. Ну і взагалі, це просто огидно, коли колишні лідери вагомих держав з європейськими цінностями працюють на Росію, яка воює проти цих цінностей. Тому потрібно боротися, потрібно бити терористів на нашій землі, потрібно поширювати інформацію про українські інтереси і здобувати для України успіхи, здобувати перемоги кожному і кожній на своєму рівні, і українцям, і партнерам. Терор можна зупинити тільки спільною, незламною силою. Підписав новий указ про нагородження наших воїнів, 194 учасника бойових дій, відзначено державними нагородами, 28 з них посмертно. Вічна пам'ять кожному, чиє життя забрали ці терористи. Слава усім, хто воює за Україну. Слава Україні!
Well, that is the end of the speech from President Zelensky. And that rounds out our Day 161 summary, and we're now going to be moving into the question segment. If you are here for the news alone, I thank you all so much for watching. If you would like to, please make sure to subscribe, as it does let you be notified of when we run these streams, which is at 10 p.m. Eastern Time every single day of the week, except for Mondays. And we will look forward to having all of y'all here to listen to all of the news we have on the war of Ukraine every single day, and also all the news, topics, and events we will be covering in the future. We do have plans, and while the finals are going on right now, and we are not uploading any video form, video format kind of, I guess you could say, content, we will be doing that in the future. It may not be, well, will definitely not be on Ukraine. We just ended the short summaries for that, but it will be on other things. And hopefully, if y'all do enjoy the coverage that we give on Ukraine, y'all will also enjoy the coverage we give on everything else that we can find around the world. And so with that, we are now going to be moving into the question segment, and thank you all to everyone who's leaving right now for watching the news. I hope you did enjoy. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right. And the first order of business we have is to go over the poll that I put up about 7 minutes ago. The question was, are you sympathetic to poorly trained Russian soldiers that are being forced to fight? So 30% said, yes, I am somewhat sympathetic. 14% said, not really, but maybe. 19% said, no, they should have refused orders. And 36% said, I have zero sympathy for orcs. As for me, I would probably fall within that 30% camp that says, yes, I am somewhat sympathetic, because the key word to me is they are being forced to fight. And they're also poorly trained. And Putin is simply using those young men, at least some of them. There are some truly nasty ones in there, as we saw with that horrible Ukrainian POW video that came out a few days ago. And those people I have no sympathy for it whatsoever. But there are young men in there that are being forced to fight. And I do have sympathy for them because they are simply pawns in the sick game that Putin is playing. But Enforcer, what are your thoughts?
I would have to more so wait on the side of no, for the most part. I'd largely have to agree with what a lot of people voted for in the poll, because while I always am in a bit of a conflict as to whether I have sympathy for Russian soldiers or not, I don't really have a lot of sympathy for Wehrmacht soldiers who fought in the Second World War for the Nazi Germans, regardless whether they were conscripts or not. A lot of them would end up committing war crimes, and there's really no way to deny that, because everyone always wants to make it sound like, oh, you know, these people weren't really involved in war crimes, they were just fighting for people who were committing war crimes. The real people in World War II, that in part of the Germans that were committing the crimes, were the SS, or the Einsatzgruppen, a very small group of people that weren't representative of the entirety of the German people. But y'all have to remember this. How in the world did that guy, who was in charge, the Chancellor of Germany in World War II, how in the world did he get into power? Wasn't it the public that voted him in there, and then he used his emergency powers to suppress the communists and pretty much solidify his rule over Germany? That kind of gives me a little bit of an idea that apparently a lot of people were sympathetic to his beliefs. On top of that, Mein Kampf was one of the books that was becoming a bestseller in Germany before he was even elected as chancellor. And then after he was elected as chancellor, it became nearly mandatory reading within Nazi Germany. And so everyone knew, because if you read that book, Mein Kampf, you will see that his view of people around the world and what will happen to them was literally written out like a plan within Mein Kampf. It was clear that he believed in this idea of autarky, which demanded that the Germans be self-sufficient as a country, and for that reason, they would need living room, which was called Lebensraum. And for that, they would have to expand out into the inferior lands filled with inferior people, such as the Slavs, kill them, and then move Germans out there and use the rest of them that they didn't kill for slave labor to toil on the land and produce food for the superior German people. And everyone in Germany knew that good and well going into this war. And a lot of people were behind it, and there's no way to lie about that. If you look at the actual history, loads of people were backing that up in Germany at the time. In fact, there was a lot of people around the world who believed in that, including Henry Ford, believe it or not. And so the Germans and the German army marched east into Russia with that well in their minds and well in their hearts, and that's why places like Belarus had a quarter of their population disappear at the very beginning of World War II and all the way through the rest of it until it was liberated by the Soviet Union again, because the German army, by and large, was filled with people who had this hatred and this sentiment against these Slavic people from the very start of the war. They had been believing this ever since 1932 for sure. The good amount of the population did, or otherwise Hitler wouldn't have been elected. And I know that a lot of people are saying, "Oh, the guy was very charismatic, and you know, he seemed like a nice guy at the start." It's just not true. You can seem like a nice guy and say this kind of nasty stuff. And he wasn't saying it against the German people. He was saying this against people outside of Germany. He was saying, all of you people are wonderful, beautiful, and perfect. But these people right outside of our borders are not. And we can get them, and we can make sure to make ourselves even better off. And people supported that. There's really no other way to get around saying that kind of stuff. Even when they brought Germans out to the concentration camps after the war and showed them what was really going on there, a lot of people just wouldn't believe it. They would go, this is a lie. Kind of like how people do these days when making up conspiracy theories about things that are straight up truth. They would go, this is a lie. This wasn't that way. It was actually this way. This isn't a concentration camp. This was a factory. And they killed all of these people and brought them out here to make it look like that. And of course, over time, the Germans have done a pretty good job of making it known as truth that the Holocaust did happen. And that was the thing that did occur. But one thing that a lot of people don't cover is the common atrocities that the German army itself was committing in the area of the Soviet Union during the entirety of World War II. And for that reason alone, I start to feel that I don't have a lot of sympathy for the average Russian soldier, because this hatred that the Russians as a nation have against the Ukrainians has to be something that is well present amongst the common soldiery, and for that reason I don't have a lot of sympathy for them, because a lot of them are probably mistreating Ukrainians and probably committing massive amounts of war crimes that we don't know about at this point, because we haven't liberated the areas to hear the horrors of what they've really been doing. And so with that, I hope that does answer the poll, at least in my opinion. And of course, there may be a lot of soldiers out there that aren't committing war crimes, but at the same time, I've seen too many horrible things behind the scenes to say that anymore. To say that I have a general leaning towards sympathy for the majority of them. And so with that, we are now into the questions, and I hope y'all take my opinion and chew it on a little bit. If y'all disagree, of course you disagree. Everyone has an opinion. That's why we throw up a poll with different answers on it. But with that, we're on to the first question of the night.
All right, and on to the first super chat. We have a $50 donation from BC Skyman, who says, "Sorry I'm late. My wife and I are filling out the documents to bring her best friend and 2 young children to the United States. It will be her first time out of the country."
Well, I thank you so much for the support, BC Skyman, and it's perfectly fine if you're late. That is a very important reason to be late for the stream, and I hope that it works out just fine and that they're able to get over here and, of course, get in safety. That's actually pretty crazy to hear that that'll be their first time out of the country, and I hope that they get brought to the good old US of A, of course, in Georgia, where you're from, and that they find it to be a nice place. Hopefully not nice enough that they want to stay. Hopefully they'd like to go back and help Ukraine rebuild, because one thing I hate to think is that these people will be displaced from their homes and then they can go to other countries, and there's culture shock with everything. I'm sure there'll be culture shock to come to the United States by several things, and to think that they'll just maybe settle. They'll be like, I don't know if where we came from is still good enough to live anymore. We'll just stay here. And then they never really go back to all the people they knew or the town they lived in. I honestly hate the idea of that, because if I got uprooted from where I lived, like where I used to live near Montgomery, Alabama, or up here in Birmingham, Alabama, and I got uprooted from here, from a war, and the town was destroyed, I would never feel like I really belonged anywhere, because I would never be able to go back to where I came from, which is Alabama. It would just be so wrecked and so destroyed that I'd just have to settle on wherever I ended up. The United Kingdom, Germany, Poland, they're not bad places. I'm not saying that they're terrible places. They're pretty nice in their own ways. They have some wonderful things going on over there. But it's not where I come from. And, that's just kind of how I view it. I'd always like to know that at some point I can go back to where I came from. And hopefully, us as the entire world can step forward after this war and help make sure that Ukrainians will have a country to return to that will hopefully be even more prosperous than the country they left. And so with that, I hope that does address that, BC Skyman. I hope that they get over here A-OK, and I hope that they're able to sit out the rest of the war in the safety of being here in the United States, which honestly has got to be the safest place in the world considering it's on its own continent. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, and thank you once again for the support, BC Skyman. I hope everything works out just fine. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $20 super chat from Mech15, who says, "How long do you think trains will be stalled at the bombed-out rail yard, and do you think that the train crossing at the Crimean Bridge was the same one targeted by the HIMARS?"
The train crossing at the Crimean Bridge. It's not the same one targeted by the HIMARS. The HIMARS does not have the range right now with the M30, M31 missiles to be able to reach the bridge. They need ATACMS for that, and as far as we know, they do not have those missiles yet. However, could you reread that first part real quick? Because I think it was talking about the explosion in Berlivka.
The first part was, how long do you think trains will be stalled at the bombed-out rail yard?
That's a tough one. It depends on if the bridge was heavily damaged or not. Because if the bridge wasn't damaged, I would largely assume that on a normal timetable, give or take a couple of days, it's mostly going to take them 5 days to get all of that rebuilt. Or, if they're just trying to do a rush job and just get one railroad track, a straight line track, made through that area to just keep traffic running, they could probably knock that out in 2 to 3 days. But that's kind of the timetable I'm looking at. Might be able to shave a day off, make it 2 days, or it might take an additional day and be around 4. But I hope that does answer that question in a way. I'm not really a railroad construction expert, and so my assumptions on how long it would take for them to build railroads like that is generally just based off of a lot of guesswork on my end. So I'm thinking that, but it may not be entirely accurate. So I hope that does answer the question, at least as far as I can answer it. And I thank you so much once again for the support. And with that, we're moving on to the next one. Thank you once again.
And next up, I want to give a shout out to Willie Jefferson for putting in a $20 donation without a comment. But thank you very much, Willie, for the support of the channel. And thank you for watching for quite some time, I do believe. And next up, we have a $14 super chat from Beef Taco, who says, "Get yourself some coffee or add to your savings fund. Great jobs, boys. And thank you, Beef Taco, for the kind words.
And thank you so much, Beef Taco, for the support. Usually, what I've been what I've been doing is that I've been saving up what we get in terms of super chats to be able, when needed, to pay for the next semester of college tuition and also to pay for coffee and other stuff like that. And so I greatly appreciate your support. I'm definitely going to, since I get so much for the coffee fund, that's probably going to be going into my college tuition fund. So I thank you so much for allowing me to have the liberty of picking where that goes. And thank you so much for the kind words, Beef Taco, as it helps us out greatly in making sure that we can keep running these streams, keep paying the bills, and of course, as I just said, keep paying the tuition, which is kind of expensive, to say the least. So with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again for the support and the kind words.
And next up, we have a $14 super chat from Olivia McCarthy, who says, with the Ukraine war in Europe and tensions in and in China over Taiwan, is the West in danger of a two-front war in terms of military support?
In terms of military support, I don't want to do the same thing I did with Ukraine and err on the side of nothing's going to happen, but with what happened with Nancy Pelosi arriving to Taiwan, and then nothing came out of it, she just flew in, flew out, and the Chinese did literally nothing during that entire event. I would assume that the training exercises they're pulling off the coast right now are going to really amount to nothing. And I don't think they'll invade because, as we know, TSMC produces 80% of the computer chips around the world, and TSMC and the Taiwanese government have plans to destroy these manufactories if the country is to be invaded, which would throw the world back into the Dark Ages nearly. And it would especially throw the Chinese back into the Dark Ages. And so in that degree, I would say they probably would not invade, and we're probably not going to have to deal with a second front in terms of supplies for those reasons. And also, we looked at the geography of Taiwan and also its western coastline, which is facing Fujian, which is part of mainland China, and it just appears that a naval invasion would be highly unlikely, if not impossible, to successfully conduct on the coastline due to its very, very broken up nature with a lot of choke points on it. Not to spend too much time talking about that again, but we'll pull up Taiwan, and I'll give you a small example of what the Chinese would have to deal with if they wanted to conduct a naval invasion here. Also, Taipei is actually a kind of pretty place. But anyways, moving down here. So you can see, here's the farmland, here's the paddies. You have a levee here, and this levee pretty much travels along any populated area. You can see it all along the coastline here. And once you get up on this levee, and you go to Street View, that is what the Chinese military is going to come into. As soon as they roll over this levee and onto the other side, they're immediately into these marshy swamps. This is not conducive for any kind of large armored action, and everything they would do if conducting a naval invasion would have to be infantry based. The supply lines would be light. The actual fighting force would be very light. It would have to be. And there's just so many choke points for the armored units that would try and come on shore that they would be facing massive amounts of casualties if they didn't get a lot of air support. And the Chinese Air Force, believe it or not, isn't really big enough to provide the air support that they most likely need. And we'd see something like what happened in Ukraine, where Taiwan's air defense forces would be able to shoot down enough Chinese aircraft at a fast enough rate that the Chinese Air Force, the People's Liberation Army Air Force, would not be able to operate really at all without the chance of most of their aircraft being shot down in the attempt. So for those reasons alone, I'm thinking, in terms of feasibility, it may be impossible for the Chinese to pull off a naval invasion of the Taiwanese coast without incurring massive amounts of casualties. And
real quick, Enforcer, if you could, I saw Lieutenant Head in the live chat say, can we see the satellite imagery of the TSMC factories? And I think I would actually like to see that myself. I'm not really sure where they are.
Let's pull that up real quick. TSMC factory in Taiwan. Factories in Taiwan. So we have several of them, actually. It looks like they actually list them off on the TSMC website. We're going to skip the corporate headquarters, though. And we're going to go to the one right here. So we're just going to... Wait, that's in China. Interesting. We'll move on past that one. Wait, these are 12-inch gigafabs. We want to find the... Oh, they have a lot of them. Jeez. These are all in the Republic of China, which is Taiwan. Fab 2. This one's in the United States in Washington. This one's in China. That one's in Republic of China, Republic of China, Republic of China, Republic of China, China, Republic of China, Republic of China. A lot of them are in a Republic. We're just going to pick FAB 14 just to see. So let's go here. Let's copy. Let's paste that right here. And that should give us... All right, so it actually gives us just the area of Tainan City. Doesn't really show us
I wonder
where...
if you just type TSMC Taiwan into the search bar on Google Maps, and what will it pull up?
TSMC. All right, so TSMC, this appears to be the factory, I believe. This entire compound may be the factory. Let's get on the road. Let's get to Street View and see if we see any TSMC signs in front of this. So here's B6, TSMC. So this is the, of course, Taiwan Semiconductor Man. That's what TSMC stands for. And this is the factory building itself. A whopping monstrosity of a building. This thing's huge. I don't know which semiconductors they manufacture here, though. And it looks like this is also part of the compound as well. So if we go back out to satellite view, this entire multiple city blocks, it seems, in size, may all be a part of TSMC. In fact, these buildings may be part of TSMC too. Let's see. No, these are part of Air Products. Pretty explanatory name. Let's see. So yes, I would assume that all of these buildings here are all part of TSMC. As we can see, it says Fab 14 there. So this is the rear end, this is the front end. And you can actually see that this factory here is actually rather large. And from what we've been able to hear, TSMC consumes more electricity per day in their manufacturing business than the entire capital city of Taipei does per day, which gives you an idea of how energy, I guess you could say, how energy consuming it is to produce these kinds of semiconductors. So with that, I hope that...
Hey, look off to the left, there's Penghu County.
Penghu County? That was a good observation. Let's see what Penghu County looks like. Interesting. Wow, the sidewalks.
That's where Penghu lives.
That's where Penghu lives. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that a little bit. And we found at least one of the TSMC factories, which is in, I believe it was in Tainan City. But anyways, with that, we're now going to be moving on to the next question. I hope that answered the possibility of the Chinese most likely invading Taiwan. And with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and next up, let me give a shout out to Martin Van Owen and Cliff Mitchell for each putting in a $14 donation, as well as WL for putting in a $10 donation. So thank you very much to all three of you for your support of the channel. And with that being said, we are moving on to the next one, which is from Mike D, who puts in a $12.34 super chat and says, will the US, UN, EU, or NATO declare Russia a terrorist state? If yes, what does that mean for Russia and its people? If no, then why not? Is cause of their oil and gas.
And I thank you so much for the support. And to answer that question, the United States has already voted unanimously, pretty much within the Congress, to deem the Russian Federation as a terrorist state. So we've already done that. And what that really means is a symbolic gesture to show how we're going to be approaching them diplomatically from here forward. We're not going to be approaching them as a nation with normal intentions like every other, for example, like Germany or the United Kingdom or China. We're going to be approaching them as a malicious force from here on in the future, and that's going to be our baseline of how we interact with them. So instead of interacting with them in trade deals and such things like that, we're going to assume that they have the worst interests in mind for everyone around the world, and that they are directly against us. I guess you could say a rival to us in terms of our interests and theirs. So that's pretty much all that it means. It doesn't really come down to anything directly to the Russian people. It's more of an abstract thing with how we'll deal with them diplomatically in the future. And so I hope that does answer the question. And I thank you so much once again for the support. I think, well, honestly, it will be the same if the European Union does that as well, or the United Kingdom, and so on. It's really just more of a here forward diplomatically we'll be treating you this way kind of thing, and not really something that will directly affect the Russian people on a person-to-person basis. But with that, I hope that does answer it, and we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Kaltenberg, who says, don't invest in crypto. And amen, do not invest in crypto.
And I have to agree with you, Kaltenberg. I highly suggest to not invest in crypto. And if y'all see anything happening in my comments section where y'all see as an account saying, I invested in crypto, Mr. Schlossum, he helped me invest in crypto and I'm now a crypto multimillionaire, don't believe it. There's no, like, becoming a crypto multimillionaire is about as difficult as winning the lottery. So do not invest in crypto. That's one thing I'm into by and large. Do not invest in crypto, or NFTs. By and large, I don't invest in stocks either, and I know that that's about to cause a firestorm. Stocks do make money. Matthew used to invest in stocks. I never did. And I learned my lessons by watching Matthew end up making nothing on the stock market. I think he actually lost a little bit. I'm not really sure, but I think he came out of it just as the same way he came in. I'm not really sure, but if you want to tell everyone, Matthew, about your experience with stocks at least, it kind of extends into crypto and NFTs as well.
Basically, I ended up breaking even, but I was playing it risky and doing individual stocks. So if you don't have much experience in the stock market, that's not the way to go. But luckily, I was just experimenting, and it was with a very, very insignificant amount of money. So very little. So just trying to play the game a little bit and see what it was about. And I learned, in short, don't get in the stock market if you don't know what you're doing. You're just going to end up losing everything.
Wait a minute, I want to read this one, Matthew. I just saw a funny one. Frame rate, it said, you're dumb as hell if you say you can't make money in the market. You cannot make money on a normal income, man, in the stock market. You have to have millions of dollars to make any kind of money in the stock market.
I mean, historically, the stock market has a 10% return. However, if you hit a bad spot like we're hitting right now, or when we hit during coronavirus, and you go to cash out, you're going to be in some serious trouble unless you have the time to wait for it to return back to normal. But I'm not going to get too deep into stocks. I can go on about that for hours. But anyways, back to you, Enforcer.
All right. And with that, we're on to the next one. Also,
All
wait a
right.
minute, real quick before we move on. Thank you once again, Kaltenberg, for saying that, because I'm not into crypto at all. And we agree with you, certainly. And so with that, we're on to the next one now that I made sure to wrap that up.
And actually, I think Kaltenberg already got off for the night with a headache. It was probably because he was thinking about crypto. But anyways, moving on to our next super chat, we have a $14 donation from Martin Van Owen once again, who says, thanks so much, no crypto.
And also, thank you so much for the support. And yes, I have to say, Martin, that I'm not a big fan of crypto. I'm not a big fan of NFTs. I'm not really a big fan of any of that stuff. I believe in the idea of just making money and saving it, and that's the way you build wealth. And, you know, because the stock market thing kind of falls into these quick wealth schemes, you know, and I'm going to have to air a clear opinion on this one here because, you know, to me, and of course you can disagree, just please make sure if you disagree with me, not to call me dumb as hell or anything like that, because that will get you banned. We're into polite discussions here, not just acting like belligerent freaks, but, I don't think that investing in stocks is a way to make any kind of money, seriously. It's kind of a get-rich-quick thing, and there's really no way for the average person like you and me to know which direction the stocks are going to be going in. Because you could invest in, say, CSX, which is a railroad company, and then they just tank. Or they could blow up. There's really no way to tell. And everyone's always acting like they have a plan. And I've seen, and you know, growing up, everyone in school was always into stocks. And everyone always had the grand plan. I'm going to invest in these stocks. They're going to blow up. I'm going to make tons of money. Then all those stocks would tank. They would lose money. They would cuss themselves out, saying they'd never do it again. They would remove all their money from the stock market, taking decent losses of hundreds of dollars, and then swear up and down that they would never go back in the stock market again. So I'm just not a big fan of it. I've never done it myself, and largely I feel pretty happy not doing that. So with that, I hope that does answer the question again, Martin, because I agree. I'm not really a big fan of crypto, or stocks for that matter. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support, Martin Van Owen.
And next up, we have a $10 super chat from Good Karma, who says, does the Enforcer know what kind of tanks the Chinese have? We might need to start looking for those.
Yes, we do. They have a large amount of ZTZ 96s. We'll actually just pull up the whole thing. We could, wait a minute. Chinese tanks. Oh no, China deploys tanks on Jimin City Beach. Internet says, show of force. Goodness me. Very scary. let's see here. We'll scroll on down. Oh, look. The Chinese army. Anyways, we're going to keep on going. You can see all of the old nasty tanks they used to operate, and now you can see the old nasty tanks they still operate, but let's see if we can get a list. Okay, it looks like they're not going to give us a list, but we're going to start off with what we know they still operate. I believe they still operate Type 88s, if I'm correct, which is a license-built version of the T-55, which is a very old tank. They still have those in service. I think this one is kind of in service. Well, actually, let's just pull up the Chinese arm, the People's Liberation Army Ground Force. And let's scroll down to their equipment, because I know they got it. Oh, come on. Main battle tanks. Oh, man, I forgot. I think we had to pull this up separately. We did pull this up on stream a little while ago, but I want to make sure. List of equipment. There we go. This is what we're looking for. Let's get down to the tanks. Let's get down to the tanks. Come on. All right. We're almost there, folks. We're almost there. All right, so here we go. I have around 600 ZTZ-99As, which are their newest tank. They have around 600 ZTZ-99s, which are, like, I guess you could say the M1 Abrams of the Type 99 series, with the Type 99A kind of being the M1A1. We can also see that they have around 2,500 ZTZ-96s, which are newer than the Type 99. They've been produced in massive numbers, but the questionability of whether these things are strong enough to survive a hit is highly questionable. Because looking at the shape of the hull design, not to get into this too far, but looking at the shape of the hull design, there's really no way for the driver to fit in there, and there to be enough composite armor right there behind that lower glacis for that to actually work. So I'm assuming that that lower glacis is paper thin. That's just an assumption on my end based off of what seems to be logical, so take it with a grain of salt, though. Then they have 300 ZTZ-88s still in service. That thing is hideous. They also have some Type 79s. They're phasing those out. They're phasing all of these out, but they're still in service. Have 300 Type 59s. Ew. Oh my gosh. It's crazy to think that they actually have these in service, but by and large, the bulk of their force is made up of ZTZ-96s, and I think that these could be taken out pretty easily with Western anti-tank weapons. It just seems like it would make sense based off of how the armor looks and how honestly how flimsy it looks, and by and large. So I hope that does answer the question, and I thank you once again so much for the support. And we will be keeping an eye on these tanks and seeing if anything starts to develop, because I think these tanks, if used, will go up like Roman candles. So with that, we're on to the next one, and thank you once again for the support.
All right, and up next, we have a $10 super chat from Dad Good, who says, Enforcer, awesome stream as usual. Please keep it up. Do you think that taking out al-Zawahiri and the timing of it is also supposed to send a message to Putin and Xi?
Ooh, that's a tough one, you see, because the United States has always been going after terrorists. And it kind of just happens whenever it happens. Like when we killed Soleimani from Iran, when we killed al-Baghdadi, just over the previous years. They didn't really line up with anything, but, you could have made, I guess, a general kind of a stance that was trying to send a message to people. But by and large, we're always just trying to hunt these people down. We've been trying to since the early 2000s. And eventually, we get them. And when we get them, we get them. So in this regard, I think that the timing of this was just that they finally found the place that he was, knew exactly where he would be, and just decided to strike at that moment. But then again, it could also have a message behind it. I'm not ruling that out. That's definitely a possibility. But killing a terrorist leader is a lot different than trying to, take on an entire country like the Russian Federation or China. So I'm not really sure if it's trying to send a message. We may have just been trying to send a message to the Taliban, which is in charge of Afghanistan, that we are not going to recognize their sovereignty and will attack terrorists still within Afghanistan when possible. So with that, I hope that does answer the question, at least in a way, in my opinion. But I think it could also be what you're saying as well, is that we're trying to send a message. It could really go either way, in my opinion. And so with that, thank you once again for the support. I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $10 super chat from Melissa Harden, who says, why worry about supply routes out of let's see here, Brielivka, when all the munitions were blown up.
Good question, but the thing about the supply routes out of Berlivka is that supplies could have traveled further because of the railroad. It travels, as far as we can tell, all the way up to the Antonovsky Railroad Bridge, which then goes into Kherson itself. And so by the Antonovsky Railroad Bridge and Berlivka, the city of Kherson could have been supplied directly by rail. And so the destruction of the depot here, or the train, could result in no supplies even being able to reach close to Kherson at any suitable railway yards anywhere in the area. So with that, I hope that does answer the question, at least in brief. And with that, thank you so much once again for the support. That was actually a really good question, and I hope I was able to answer that fairly well. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $10 super chat from Alex Wolf, who says, can you talk a little about the drone launched Hellfire RX-9 missile that killed Al-Qaeda leader Ayman al-Zawahiri? I know it's a little off topic, but very interesting missile.
Let's pull up this Hellfire RX-9 missile. Secret U.S. missile aims to kill only terrorists. That's a pretty high goal right there. This from the Wall Street Journal. It's always weird to me when the Wall Street Journal writes about military stuff, because it's like, how in the world does that have anything to do with economics? But anyways.
Oh, that's the one that throws knives. I think I've heard about that one.
Weapon doesn't What in the world?
Yeah, I've heard about that. It sounds like a pretty brutal weapon.
Gosh, that's like, jeez. That, I don't know. Golly, I think it would be better to just have collateral than sling knives at people. I mean, like, what if you miss? I mean, like, you're going to literally sit there and stab someone. Well, what? I mean, like, the ninja bomb. People are calling it the ninja bomb. I've never heard of this before. I've heard of Hellfires, yes, but I've never heard of one flinging knives at people. What on earth? This is brand new to me. Let's see if we can find that one. With a kinetic warhead with pop-out blades instead of explosives. Used against specific human targets. Its lethality is due to 45 kilograms of dense material with 6 blades flying at high speed to crush and cut the targeted person. It's been referred to as the ninja missile and the flying Ginsu. It is intended to reduce collateral damage when targeting specific people. Deployed in secret in 2017, its existence has been public since 2019. This variant was used in the killings of Jamal Ahmad Mohammed al-Badawi, accused mastermind of the 2000 USS Cole bombing, and Abu Qayyar al-Masri, a member of al-Qaeda's leadership. The weapon has also been used in Syria and in Afghanistan against a Taliban commander. It was used twice in 2020 against senior al-Qaeda leaders in Syria, so this thing's been used multiple times at this point. This has got to be the wildest thing I've ever heard, because this sounds like the slap chop. And I just saw someone in the live chat say the same thing. Hey guys, I'm here with a slap chop. You put down the vegetables on the table, slap. You got some minced vegetables. You slap down an Al-Qaeda leader, slap. You got yourself some chunky meat. But I don't like, honestly, this sounds brutal. I don't know why. I would rather there be collateral damage, because I feel like that's at least acceptable with an explosion, because it would be quick, than literally slinging down a massive Ginsu blade on someone and killing them that way. This sounds like something.
And Enforcer, did you say 4? It just has 4 blades it deploys?
It has 6 blades, 6 of them.
6 blades. So that has to be a really, really accurate missile to actually just kill the one person.
I don't know. Can we run a poll on this of whether people like this kind of idea or not? Because it gets the job done, yes. It apparently only hits the individual person they're going for, but at the same time, I mean, gosh, it just sounds, I don't know, it sounds brutal. So let's see what everyone thinks, because it's literally a slap chop. This is a flying explosive slap chop. Also, I can see someone saying, you can slap chop your nuts, because that's something that the guy said in the infomercial. But anyways, with that, we're now going to move on to the next question. Thank you very much for bringing this up. This is a weird one that I've never heard or seen of before. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question. It looks like I'm in the minority in apparently thinking it's kind of a little messed up. But with that, we're on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $20 super chat from Sweaty Chungus, who says, do you think there is a connection to Ukraine being one of the top suppliers of neon and Taiwan being the top computer chip developers? Also, any interest in covering UAP-related news developments?
UAP. Do you know what that stands for? Because my brain isn't really firing in the right way to understand that abbreviation.
UAP. Nothing's coming to mind thinking about. I'm not really sure. Sweaty Chungus, if you could put a clarification in the live chat so we can make sure we answer the question accurately.
Well, let's see. I thank you very much for the support, and we're going to move on to that first part of the question, which I can answer. I don't think there's any direct correlation or reason why Ukraine and Taiwan are under threat right now, and Ukraine produces neon and Taiwan produces semiconductors. I think that's more of a coincidence at this point than deliberate choice, because there's a lot of things, of course, that can always look like correlation equals causation, but I think in this instance it's largely geopolitical factors that are leading to these tense standoffs in Taiwan and also the war in Ukraine. But I do thank you very much for the support. It is an interesting correlation, but I still don't think it equals causation, just due to the reasons why Russia went to war and also the reasons why China wants to invade and make Taiwan a part of the People's Republic of China. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, and I thank you so much once again for the support, Sweaty Chungus, and hopefully we've been able to get a little bit of clarification about that abbreviation at the end.
He said, unidentified aerial phenomenon news. So UFOs.
Unfortunately, I don't really want to cover that because that starts to fall a lot into conspiracy theories for the large part, and I don't want to fall into the ancient aliens kind of category, where, you know, like, who built the pyramids? Aliens, you know, and I don't know. I don't really like the UFO kind of stuff. If I was to cover something like that, it would most likely be trying to talk about it in terms of a top secret aircraft, most likely being tested or something similar to that. But I wouldn't want to cover that just because it gets into a really conspiracy theory field. There's not a lot of facts or evidence to work off of when looking at stuff like that. And so I largely would say, no, I wouldn't really go into that category. But I do thank you for the support. Pretty interesting question and an idea to bring up. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support, Sweaty Chungus. It does help us to keep going.
And also, Enforcer, I want to mention that I've seen a couple of people say in the live chat that killing is killing, and also, why does it matter? But my rebuttal to that would be, there are certain ways that people are killed that are more brutal than others. For example, there are war crimes, like you don't use white phosphorus on people to kill them. That's a war crime. So there are ways that are more nastier than others. So I would have to rebut the idea that killing is just killing, because really it's not.
Well, I would have to say to everyone who's saying killing is killing, we don't view it that way when the Russians, like Matthew said, drop white phosphorus onto Ukrainian soldiers, and we also don't view it that way when the Russians say that they're hitting military targets and slam a cruise missile into a building filled with civilians. We don't really view it that way when that kind of stuff is happening. If killing's killing, then why do we put any limitations on war? Why not let them use incendiaries on each other just all the time, 24/7? Hell, why not let them use chemical weapons? Because killing is killing. But we have barriers that we do not cross because we try and put moral limits on what is acceptable and what is not acceptable, even during a war. And in that kind of situation, I just don't know, because unless if it can be proved to me that that switchblade or whatever it's flinging out of the front of this Maverick, Hellfire, is killing the person instantly, I don't really know. It kind of sounds a little brutal. That's also another thing that I would like to address, is that moving on out of the category of war, there's forms of executions, of ways that people can be executed here in the U.S. for crimes that are unacceptable. We do not hang anyone anymore. We do not shoot anyone in firing squads. We do not put them on electric chairs, because we consider these forms of killing unacceptable. And so if we consider killing to be killing, then why not kill inmates on death row by hanging anymore? We do it by lethal injection because we consider it to be more humane. So with that, I hope that does kind of address the reason why I'm kind of on the fence about it, but I see that the majority of y'all see that it's largely not inhumane, so pretty interesting results. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and next up, we have a $10 super chat from KPX1138, who says, how do you feel about the Senate voting against the Burn Pit Act, which would have provided medical and monetary help to veterans exposed to the vile toxins in Iraq and Afghanistan. What are your thoughts?
Unfortunately, if I addressed that, that would be getting into American politics. So I do understand why you would like to bring that up, and it is a good point to talk about. But unfortunately, due to my political rule, I can't really weigh in on that because, regardless of how I weigh in on it, it's going to be siding with one political party or the other. So with that, I hope that does answer the question in a way, at least why I cannot answer it. But I do thank you for the support. I'm sorry once again that I can't really answer it. And so with that, we're on to the next question.
And I will say, not to get political in that question, but we should help the veterans. And I'm not going to get any more deeper into it than that. But they should be helped. They fought for the country, and they deserve, to be compensated if something was done wrong to them. But anyways, moving on to the next super chat, we have a $5 donation from CA Lags, who says, "What is your name, Putin of Russia? What is your quest to beat Ukraine? What is your favorite color? Blue. No."
Wait, can you reread that one real quick for me?
I'm trying to figure out if it's maybe a riddle or something he was trying to say. He said, "What is your name, Putin of Russia?
Wait a
What
minute,
is
no,
your quest?"
it's a joke from Monty Python. You know, it's like the bridge thing.
Oh. Oh, okay. I didn't catch it.
Also, real quick, I'm sorry, but we're going to have to do something real quick. Let me just take care of this. All right, so I'm going to address something really quick because I just saw that it happened again. I do not address politics in any way, shape, or form. I have my own political opinions, and they will be mine and mine alone. If you think that you're going to come in here, even regular viewers, because I get really sick and tired of this, and because I do not take a political side to make sure that we do not make people feel hostile for one reason or another, and you want to frame me as one side or the other, you will be banned. And while I did just give out a timeout to someone who's been watching this channel for a while, I do not like being framed in one political party or another. So I want to address that real quick, because I don't think anyone understands how much that aggravates me that I take a neutral path so I don't get framed as one or the other. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have another super chat from CA Lags, who puts in a $5 donation once more and says the Marines are working on a version of the ATACMS that can hit a ship called PRSM.
Interesting. Let's pull that up. PRSM. Let's see. PRSM missile. Let's see. Long range precision strike, advanced propulsion, also be thinner and sleeker. Doubling the number carried by M270 and the HIMARS. So apparently the HIMARS would be able to carry 12 of these, and the M270 would be able to carry some 24 of them, which is pretty impressive. Plan to, let's see, will not be able to hit stationary targets on land, but later versions will track moving targets on land and sea. So apparently they're working on a version of a HIMARS missile, I guess you could say, that would actually be able to track a target, but right now it seems that that ability is non-existent, and that's why they're trying to develop this precision strike missile for the HIMARS and the M270s. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support and bringing that up, and that does confirm that apparently the HIMARS missiles that are being used right now cannot track a target, but they're working on missiles that could do something similar to like that. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next one, and thank you so much for the support and bringing that up.
And next up, we have two donations that were left without comments. We have a $5 donation from Max and a $5 donation from Louise Highsmith. So thank you very much to both of you for your support and watching the channel for a very long time, and we appreciate you very much. And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Mike P, who says, "I was shocked to see a missile hit a single man armed only with pop-out Ghillie knives. Now I see why HIMARS and 777 can be so accurate."
Yes, I would have to say, although I'm kind of on the fence as to whether the Ghillie knife thing is brutal or not, because one thing I'm thinking is that the velocity probably kills them instantly, but the other thing is that what if it doesn't, and you just literally just chop someone up into like a fine piece of cut meat, and then they're just sitting there dying slowly. That's kind of the part that I'm like, yeah, I don't know. If you can prove that they get killed instantly, though, I'd say it's perfectly fine. But yes, I would say that's a pretty good explanation of why the M777 and the HIMARS can hit targets dead on. And I would have to say, if it does kill the target instantly, then that does show that the United States takes a whole lot extra effort in making sure that collateral damage in terms of civilians is cut down drastically as compared to the Russians, which will literally level an entire city. And so with that, thank you so much for the support. That is a really good point, actually, as to why the U.S. has a lot of precision weapons and how they keep on trying to develop them and use them. And with that, we're on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Kevin Scott 76, who says, Matt, you should be teaching college classes. What about, along with your YouTube success, being a high-paid history professor and a famous historian? And he definitely intended to send that to the enforcer because I don't know history that well, and the history major is the enforcer.
Well, I thank you very much for the support and also the nice comments. While they were directed at Matthew, I guess they were directed at me. But to answer that question, I would rather like to go on to try and be the president. On it, yeah, really, I don't know. I mean, I sit here and I try and talk about things sometimes in a very neutral way about the United States just to cover them a little bit, and then I see that politics is largely almost a lost cause in this country. I'm going to be entirely honest. People, I wouldn't even say it's a problem with the politicians necessarily. It may be a problem with the public itself, because there's no way that you can talk about anything anymore without people having crazy opinions, being incredibly violent about them, and I don't know. I mean, like, honestly, after sitting here for 161 days, and American politics always has a way of seeping in everywhere, I sit there and look at it, and I'm like, I don't know. I really don't know anymore. I might go with being a history professor. I'm not entirely sure, but I do thank you so much for the support. It's a fine compliment, but still, I would like to hold out the dream that I could hopefully become a fairly good U.S. president that the entire nation could be proud of someday. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. I hope everyone understands where I'm coming from with the whole thing of saying that politics is nearly a lost cause these days. That's why I want to try and run for president, to make it a cause worth actually talking about and being a part of. But then again, I also don't want fanatics. I think that's a big problem with this nation these days, is that there's far too many people who have gotten so bored they have to become a fanatic for something, and then they pick political parties to become fanatics for. That's not just going for one side, that's going for both sides. And so with that, I hope that addresses the comment, and we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Gamer Does Games, who says, do you think the Ukraine army is going to push to reclaim Crimea? Can you donate this to United 24, Slava Ukraine?
Yes, we can donate to that to United 24, but I would also like to let you know that if you would like to directly donate to United 24, we do have a link in the description below that will take you directly there, where you can support United 24. But do you think Ukraine army is going to push to reclaim Crimea? I think they would. If a counterattack in Kherson actually succeeds and they retake the city, I think it would be within their minds and within their plans to eventually try and push down the Crimea. So the answer to that is, depending on the situation, if they're actually able to take back Kherson, then yes, they most likely would. And so I thank you so much once again for the support, Gamer Does Games, and I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $4 super chat from Heather Timms, who says, has there been any attacks around Ternopil?
Ternopil. I will have to pull that one up. Ternopil. There we go. City in Ukraine. Let's pull this up. Let's get this up here. Let's see where this is. Come on. No, there's been no attacks near Ternopil. It's about as far west as you can go in Ukraine without getting to Lviv, so I don't think so. It's very far away from the front lines. And if that is the town you're talking about, I hope it is, because there's probably about 4 or 5 different towns named Ternopil in Ukraine. But as far as we can tell with this one, the answer would be no. Also, that is an impressive building right there. That's like a Greek temple, nearly. But with that, I hope that does answer the question, and I thank you so much for the support. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $3 super chat from Neb Haran, who says, hey, Enforcer, I've been watching your daily stream since day 51, and I'm just giving you this $5 to keep those streams running.
And thank you so much for the support. And of course, thank you for being a longtime Lee Spring Army member and enjoying these streams through and through. I try my best to make sure that the news is good, it shows what's going on, and that it's, of course, listenable to, something that people can watch and actually get through the entirety of. And I thank you so much for the support. Every little bit helps us out a great deal and helps us to keep these streams running. And so I've got to say thank you so much to each and every one of y'all for y'all's support, because it really does help us out a lot. And so with that, we're on to the next question, and thank you once again.
And up next, I want to give a shout out to Gilbert Castro for putting in a $2 super chat without a comment. Thank you very much, Gilbert, for your support. And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Santiago Flores, who says, I love the way we try to stay on the topic of Ukraine, and on the other side, we all learn something out of the stream.
And thank you so much for the support, Santiago. Of course, we try and keep everything about Ukraine. We don't want to delve into other things like the United States. And I'll explain why. I've never explained for a long time the exact motives as to why we don't include the United States. Well, politics in particular. We talk about the United States, and I'm very proud of the country, but I don't talk about politics for one reason, really, and one reason alone. If I talked about American politics on this stream, number one, I would immediately get thrown into a camp. And it doesn't matter which camp it is. I would either get thrown into Camp A or Camp B. And then the live chat, if I allow politics to be spoken about, would pretty much do the rest. Because there's of course, one group that outweighs the other. There's got to be. I don't know which one it is, but out of both sides, there's got to be a group that's going to outweigh the other. They're going to beat the other group of people off this stream, and then we're going to get thrown in camp. Well, this whole Enforcer Lee Spring Army community will get thrown in a camp for that reason as well. And so then, we won't really be about Ukraine. We'll be about America and American politics and one political party or the other. And then Ukraine will be the sideshow, and we'll be leveraging tens of thousands of dead people in a war that's been going on for 6 months at this point, to try and further an American political agenda. It sounds tasteless. It sounds gross and despicable, and that's why I don't allow American politics to be discussed in any way on the stream. It dilutes what we're here for. It dilutes Ukraine and the war that they're fighting over there, and it's trying to use them and their deaths and their suffering as a soapbox to sit there and say, I'm right, y'all are wrong, or something like that. That's not right, and I don't think that's something that me as a YouTuber and someone that people listen to should do, is try and push my political values on y'all. I make sure to not let anyone have an indication of what my true political values and inclinations are. I try and word everything as neutrally as possible when talking about it, because y'all as citizens should come up with y'all's own opinions. Y'all should not have to subscribe to my school of thinking. Y'all should not subscribe to anyone else's school of thinking. You should believe what's best for you. And that's how I think that politics in this country should be run. I'm not into, as a critique on both sides, I'm not into, we have a big political thinker, and there's large political entities or individuals in every camp right now. So just come up with whoever you want right now. I subscribe to this guy's line of thinking, and then you have like 50 million people who think this way, or 50 million people who think another way. I highly believe in thinking for yourself and never trying to get into another group. That's why when someone asks, like, I actually had a question about this, like, you think like so-and-so. No, I don't. I don't even know what he thinks, because I've always just tried to come up with whatever I think. So if it aligns, that's just mere coincidence. That's not me trying to deliberately go out of my way to say, yes, I agree with this guy and everything he says. So with that, I hope that does address that comment, Santiago. And that's the reason why, just to go over it, because we've never said that for a long time, why we don't actually allow American politics in here, because it wouldn't be about Ukraine anymore. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support, Santiago. It helps us to keep these streams running, and it helps us to keep on doing what we try and do. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And for our final super chat of the night, we have a $1 donation from Paul J. So thank you very much for the support to the channel. And that wraps up all of our super chats. So we are now moving on to the live chats when you are ready, Enforcer.
All right, and with that, we are on to the first one. And also, before we move on to the first one, due to time constraints tonight, we're going to read off 7 to 10 of them. We're going to have to see how quickly we get through them, but it's most likely going to be somewhere around 7 to 10. And so with that, let's get to the first one.
All right, and the first one is from Mark Hodges, who says, tonight's Morse cipher equals model Enigma T reflector, UKW position 4D ring, 6F rotor, VPOS, and he sends a lot of those type things behind it as well.
And it sounds like you did get the cipher correct. So if you did get that cipher, and if you're still here, you can rewind to the beginning for the number station Morse code, which is in the Enigma code, and you now have all the stuff you need to input into the Enigma machine to then decode it. So I wish you all the best of luck. It does have a message within it, and I hope y'all are able to find it out, because it's a pretty interesting one. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And congratulations for reading off the cipher.
All right. And next up, we have a question from Derek Banks, who says, if we have stealth and now know Russia's defense sucks, but we don't send a stealth bomber and take out Putler.
Can you reread that real quick?
Yes, I think Derek meant to say, since we have stealth and we now know that Russia's defense is not good to it, why don't we send a stealth bomber and take out Putler?
Because that would get us right into World War III, because who else would have done it but the United States? Just because it's stealth doesn't mean that when Putler literally gets turned into a pink mist by a JDAM, that they wouldn't be able to figure out who did it. So with that answers the question, because while it's possible that we could pull it off without them really figuring out until the bomb bay doors opened and that gave off the radar signature right over Moscow, they would be able to put together the pieces of who exactly did that, because there's only one country, really, that's capable of such a thing right now, and that's us. And so with that, I hope that answers the question. We're on to the next one.
And next up, we have a question from Woody Stems, who says, what is the difference between a rocket and a missile?
A rocket is unguided, and a missile has some kind of guidance system in it. Previously in history, missile and rocket really didn't have... Well, a missile could be anything that was flying at all. It could be an arrow could be called a missile, but a rocket specifically used some kind of a gunpowder propellant, I guess you could say, to rocket itself forward. Rockets are kind of a new thing, really, with the invention of gunpowder. But missiles, at least in their textbook definition form, have been around ever since the very start with the javelin. But in modern terms, a rocket is an unguided projectile that uses some kind of a solid propellant, most likely, that flies up in the air, and depending on the burn time of that propellant, it flies out a certain range. A missile, on the other hand, can guide itself, so you can input a specific spot, like Krasnohrad, right here, and it'll fly itself there. Regardless of its the amount of fuel it has or its range, it will make it there and hit the target. And so I hope that does answer the question, and we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from I Am Gift Bearer, who says, Enforcer, is there any further news on fighter jets being supplied to Ukraine, either by the U.S. or other countries?
Unfortunately, we haven't heard a lot of news about that right now. The last thing we had heard from anyone is that I believe the Slovakians were going to be sending over several MiG-29s, and the Bulgarians were also going to be sending over around 50 Su-25s, although we haven't really been able to confirm that those ever arrived. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, at least off of the last bit of news we got on that, and we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a question from Teresa Bell, who says, Enforcer, have you heard that Moscow is saying America is in control of the HIMARS trajectory systems because there's no way Ukraine could be so accurate with their hits on ammo dumps?
I haven't heard about that, but I wouldn't doubt that the Russians are trying to throw some kind of blame on the United States. And the best thing I can tell the Russians to do with that is to just cope, because the Ukrainians were trained fairly well on how to use those systems, and the crews that were then trained can return and train more crews, and then, of course, that can grow at an exponential rate as long as they're getting HIMARS to use. And so I would have to say that that's most likely bogus, but then again, you never know, because sometimes we do get involved in wars in that kind of way. And also the Soviets have done that before too, in earlier times in history. So I hope that has answered the question, at least in a way, and with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Rus, who says, is it true Russia asking for a peace treaty now, as some other sites report?
Wait a minute, can you reread that?
They want to know if Russia is asking for a peace treaty.
As far as I know right now, the answer to that is no. So with that, I hope that does answer the question. Pretty short one, but as far as I know, it's just not happening. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from General Putnam 2, who says, any word on the alarm sounded by the International Nuclear Oversight Group in reference to the RF-held nuclear power plant?
I have not heard about that at the moment. I have heard that everyone's talking about the artillery barrages that are happening in the area are becoming a little bit too much, but I have not heard about that particular incident, unfortunately. So I'm going to have to declare ignorance on that. Can't really comment on it just because I don't know anything about it. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Pakatang, who says, Enforcer, why are many Asian, Middle Eastern, and South American countries largely indifferent to the war in Ukraine and see the war as Europeans or NATO's problem?
That's because with the Middle East doesn't really like to align with anything. Just kind of as a fact of the matter, they usually try and focus on what's going on inside of the Middle East, which is usually a lot. There's usually way too much going on in the Middle East, so they never really get involved in anything. Africa doesn't have the economic ability to do anything, just as the honest truth, and so it's really out of their control by and large for most of them. South America, on the other hand, they don't really get involved in anything because, once again, there's not a lot of economic activity down there. And so there's not really a lot of money for them to throw around to say, hey, I don't like this, I think we can do something about it. If they liked it or disliked it, they're just going to have to live with it because they don't really have the ability to enforce what they would like. I think Brazil GDP. I want to check this real quick just to make sure. Ooh, goodness gracious, they've really tanked. Golly, that is rough. They've gone all the way down to 1.4 trillion as a yearly GDP in 2020. And the last time it was close to that would have been 2007, which was before the recession. Golly, wow, Brazil's doing really bad. That's all I got to say. In fact, they're doing worse than the Russians. But how many people live in Brazil? Let me check that. Oh, goodness, they have twice the population of the Russians. And they also have the same GDP, a little less than the Russians. Yikes, that's not good for them. So that was also a reason why, is that there's not a lot of economic ability in South America, Africa, and for the large part, the Middle East, or the Middle East is just indifferent to it, and they don't really care. So I hope that does answer the question as to why they view it as more as NATO's problem, just due to the economic factors involved. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question. We are on to the next.
And up next, we have a question from Richie MC, who says, Enforcer, did Ukraine help NATO during the Afghanistan-Iraq war, allowed airspace, provided man and aid? If so, NATO should provide more offensive weapons now, ?
Yes, they did help out in Iraq. There was, in fact, 20 Ukrainian soldiers that were killed in the invasion of Iraq and peacekeeping operations. I'm not really sure about Afghanistan, though. That's a different picture, and due to time constraints, we're not going to pull that up just now. But they did help out in Iraq, and they've been trying to be a friend of goodwill to really everyone for pretty much all of their history over the past 30 years. The Russians, the West, everyone. They've just tried to, be on everyone's friendly side. But we can see now that that hasn't really worked with the Russians, and I do agree that for that reason of the Ukrainians always trying to operate in good faith with the West, that we should continue to support them and support them even more because of that reason. So I hope that does answer the question, or at least address the comment. It was a very good observation. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Bill G, who says, no one expected Finland to hold out against the USSR, but they did. Why do people constantly underestimate small nations?
People always underestimate small nations because people always just look at a spreadsheet. They'll roll well, here's the typical American public school education for you. You look at a map like this. You see, here's the whole world. And a kid will walk up to the map and almost no one corrects them. Wow, look at Russia. They're so big. They must be so strong. And that's it. That's the whole reason why most people think that smaller countries will get steamrolled. It's just because this country owns more land. Therefore, they must be stronger. Finland is a smaller country. Therefore, they must be a lot weaker. And so, the Russians, or the Soviet Union at the time, which included a lot more land than what the Russian Federation does, they're going to steamroll the Finnish for that reason. And then also, there's the kind of, I guess you could say, analysis or channels out there that sit there and go, oh, look, the Russians, they have 13,000 tanks on paper. The Finnish have 870. So, therefore, the Russians will win. And they don't ever consider the quality of those tanks, how old they are, the training of the soldiers that will be using them, the training of the Finns or their quality of tanks. And that's kind of why these in considerations can be taken. And also the other thing that's never considered is that even if, for example, the Soviets were able to successfully invade Afghanistan, what about resistance fighters? How long will they last? Will they get any foreign support? Will that become something that a country cannot really keep up with, like the US and the Soviet Union ended up doing in Afghanistan? You know, that's something that a lot of people never consider as well, is resistance fighters, and how long will they last? And how much damage will they really do? And that's why a lot of people always underestimate smaller countries, is because none of these things are thrown into the equation. I guess the qualitative side of things more so than the quantitative side of things. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we're going to move on to 3 more questions from the chat. And after that, we're going to be rounding out tonight's stream.
And next up, we have a question from Ashley Fitzsimmons, who says, Enforcer, have you heard the SSU recording of what really happened in Olenivka? I refer to the murder of the Ukraine POW.
Unfortunately, I have not heard that phone recording. I usually do not listen to phone recordings. I usually pass them by as kind of a hearsay thing, because you cannot see the person talking on the phone on both ends, which kind of takes it into that category of not really being picture or video evidence. We have included a little bit of it before, I think once. It was with the Russian rabbit one, where the guy said they were running around like rabbits. But I don't really look at that much, because it's really hard to confirm whether those phone calls are real or not. But of course, what happened in Olenivka was an absolute war crime and a tragedy, and the Ukrainians ought to make sure that the Russians pay dearly for what they did to those Ukrainian prisoners of war. So with that, I hope that does answer the question, at least as far as I'm able to. And with that, we're moving on to the second to last question of the night.
And next up, we have a question from Packeting once again, who says, Enforcer, is the U.S. changing to be more regionally focused, North and Central America, and less internationally or globally involved?
Oh no, we're definitely globally involved. We always focus on the, I guess you could say, our sphere of influence, the Monroe Doctrine kind of area. We always make sure to keep the Central American and North American countries, which was really just Canada, but we always make sure to keep them in our corner pocket, make sure that they're friendly with us, at least in a way. Mexico is a little bit of a different situation depending on what's going on, but we still try. Also, with the South American countries, we largely let them out of our scope. I mean, like, we try and keep them at least indifferent to us, or something along that line, although Venezuela is directly hostile against us right now. But we largely leave South America alone to their own devices. But Central America, everything from Panama up, we always make sure to focus on with great intent. Just for the reason of it protects us nationally. But moving beyond that, we still focus internationally on everything around the world. That's why the Speaker of the House and her delegation traveled to Taiwan and is making a trip around a lot of the East Asian countries. That's also why we look with concern on what's happening with India and the direction that they're taking. And we also make sure to provide arms and supplies to the Ukrainians, because we're still internationally focused as much now as we've ever been. We're really the only country that can do it, and regardless whether the public likes it or not, the United States, by its economic power alone and also how it's positioned itself, is pretty much forced to be a police and peacekeeper of the world right now, much like the British Empire was until it went into decline in the 50s. So with that, I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we are on to the final question of the night. And so who is the lucky last person who threw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is the Beezer, who says, thoughts on appearance of possible new munition or drone?
Possible new munition or drone. I don't, if you're talking about the Ukrainians, I don't know if they will be getting new drones. They are largely fielding almost all of them that they can, that the United States does not use. And munitions, there's always the chance that new munitions can pop up. There's so many of them out there that it's always a chance, but I'm not entirely sure, because that's kind of getting into the weeds a little bit, because there's just so much that each artillery system can use that's special to itself. But with that, I hope that does answer the question, at least in a way. And we have reached the end of tonight's stream. It has been a kind of a long one. It's been 3 hours and 9 minutes long right now, but I hope you all have enjoyed every single second of it, because I have definitely enjoyed delivering the news to all of y'all as to what's been going on in the war, and hopefully the Ukrainians will be able to turn the tide and start pushing the Russians back. If you've been watching this stream from start to finish, then you are a trooper, and I thank you so much for watching, and I highly recommend that you subscribe. We run these streams every single day of the week at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, except for Mondays, covering the past 24 hours of the war, and I hope that you all join me tomorrow to cover the next 24 hours of the war in Ukraine on day 162 at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you all once again, and I'll see you all tomorrow night. Good night, and take care.